Greetings, Lore Masters. Tonight, our chronicle covers the rot at the heart of the Rift, a tale not of dragons or Daedra, but of coin, corruption, and the cold, unyielding steel of a mercantile monopoly. We are walking the cobblestones of Riften, where the autumn leaves fall as thick as the thieves' pockets, and where the golden glow of honey wine barely conceals the bloodstains on the floorboards. We are delving into the history and the horror of the Black-Briar family, the true power behind the throne in Skyrim's majestic mist-shrouded southeast. The air here smells of damp wood, fermenting berries, and the distinct, metallic tang of fear. It is a city of canals and shadows, a place where the sun seems to struggle to pierce the canopy of the golden birch trees, casting everything in a perpetual amber twilight. It is beautiful, in a decaying sort of way, like a piece of fruit that is just starting to sweeten into rot. And sitting atop this heap of refuse and riches like a spider in the centre of a gilded web is Maven Black-Briar. Let's be honest, most of us would rather face a legendary dragon with a rusty iron dagger than owe Maven a single septim past the due date. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me, where are you listening from tonight? Is it the dead of night in the foggy streets of London, or perhaps a rainy afternoon in Seattle? Let me know in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Riften is a city defined by layers. There is the literal layering of the wooden walkways, built one atop the other to keep the citizens out of the murky canal waters below, and then there are the layers of power. On the surface, you have the Jarl and the Hold Guards, the ostensible law of the land. But strip away that thin veneer of legitimacy, and you find the hard bedrock of the Black-Briar family. To understand the darkest secrets of this clan, we must first understand the mechanism of their control, the Meadery. The Black-Briar Meadery is not merely a brewery. It is the beating heart of Riften's economy. It is a sprawling industrial complex that dominates the city's architecture, its chimneys constantly belching sweet, cloying smoke into the sky. While the rest of Skyrim worries about civil wars and returning dragons, Maven Black-Briar worries about distribution channels and profit margins. She approaches business with the same lethal pragmatism that a Dark Brotherhood assassin approaches a contract. In fact, one could argue she is far more efficient. An assassin kills one target. Maven kills entire supply chains. The iron grip isn't a metaphor. It is the reality of commerce in the Rift. If you walk into the Bee and Barb, the local tavern, you will notice a distinct lack of variety on the drink menu. You can order Black-Briar mead, or you can order, well, mostly just Black-Briar mead. Oh sure, there might be a stray bottle of Alto wine or some Nord mead imported from the west, but the local taps flow with only one brand. This isn't because the people of Riften have a unanimous, undying love for the flavour profile of Maven's brew. It is because serving anything else is an invitation for accidents. A shipment goes missing, a warehouse catches fire, a tavern keeper wakes up to find their liquor license revoked and a hefty fine from the Jarl's court. This brings us to a fascinating point of contention within the community. There is a long-standing debate among fans and lore divers about whether Black-Briar mead is actually any good. We see NPCs drinking it by the gallon, and it is certainly the most ubiquitous alcohol in the province. However, if you listen to the idle chatter of the common folk, particularly those outside of Riften who aren't under Maven's immediate thumb, you hear a different story. Some call it swill. Others claim it tastes like troll spit mixed with honey. The debate essentially boils down to whether Maven is a master brewer or simply a master marketer with a monopoly. The stats in the game suggest it's a standard stamina-restoring beverage, functionally identical to Nord mead. But the price? The price is higher. It is a luxury brand forced upon a captive market. It's the Skyrim equivalent of buying a mediocre coffee at an airport, because it's the only stall open, and they charge you triple because frankly, what else are you going to do? Drink from the canal? I wouldn't recommend it, unless you're trying to build up a resistance to rock joint. But Maven doesn't care about the connoisseur's opinion, she cares about ubiquity. Her goal is to ensure that when a Nord thinks of celebration, they think of the Black-Briar crest. When a soldier needs to numb the pain of a frostbite wound, they reach for her bottle. This saturation is achieved through aggressive, often violent, expansionism. She has effectively strangled the local competition before it can even leave the fermentation vat. Consider the sheer logistical miracle of her operation. In a province torn apart by the Stormcloak Rebellion, where roads are plagued by bandits, giant spiders, and the occasional angry mammoth, Black-Briar mead trucks, well, carts, move with surprising impunity. You find her bottles in the deepest, dustiest Draugr crypts, sitting on shelves that haven't been touched in 1,000 years. Now obviously that is a quirk of the game's loot tables, but let's look at it through a lore lens for a moment. It implies that even the grave robbers and bandits of previous eras, or perhaps the modern bandits squatting in those ruins, prioritize her product. It suggests a supply chain that penetrates every corner of the map. Maven's presence in the game is usually felt before it is seen. When you first enter Riften, you are likely stopped by a guard, shaking you down for a visitor's tax. That corruption flows downstream from the meadery. The guards are underpaid by the Jarl, but they are kept fat and happy by the Black-Briar payroll. This creates a closed loop. Maven pays the guards to look the other way. The guards enforce her will on the populace. The populace spends their meagre earnings on her mead, and the gold flows back to Maven. It is a perpetual motion machine of graft. There is a rather obscure little detail, a lore tidbit that many adventurers miss because they are too busy sprinting toward the Thieves Guild cistern to sell their stolen sweet rolls. If you sneak into the private quarters of the Black-Briar Manor, or carefully examine the ledger in the Meadery office, you can find evidence of Maven's extensive export network that bypasses Skyrim entirely. She isn't just selling to Nords. She has contracts with the Cyrodiilic Empire, and even ties to Solitude's Blue Palace that predate the current civil unrest. There are crates marked for export that contain Black-Briar Reserve, a vintage that is aged longer and supposedly tastes far better than the common slop served at the Bee and Barb. This suggests a two-tier system. The reserve for the high lords and ladies of the Empire to keep them happy and politically aligned, and the standard, swiftly fermented batch for the rabble. It mirrors real-world historical monopolies where the best product is sent away to generate foreign capital, while the locals are left with the dregs. It perfectly encapsulates Maven's view of her own people. They are cattle to be milked, not customers to be wooed. The fear she inspires is so potent that it warps the behaviour of everyone around her. Even Mjol the Lioness, the self-proclaimed protector of Riften who rails against the Thieves Guild, seems strangely hesitant to march directly into the Black-Briar Manor and start swinging her sword, grim as ever. Mjol knows that the guild is just a tool, the hand-wielding. It belongs to Maven. To strike at the Black-Briars is to strike at the structural integrity of the city itself. If the Meadery closes, Riften starves. Maven has made herself too big to fail. We must also consider the personality of the matriarch herself. Maven is rarely seen shouting. She doesn't need to raise her voice. Her dialogue is delivered in a flat, bored monotone that is infinitely more terrifying than a bandit chief's screaming threats. When you speak to her, she doesn't threaten to kill you. She asks you why you are wasting her time, with the implication that her time is worth more than your life. She is the ultimate quest giver who doesn't actually want you to complete the quest. She wants you to disappear or be useful, and she doesn't particularly care which. There is a darker layer to this monopoly, one that we will explore deeper as we go, but it starts with the simple economics of suppression. Maven doesn't just want to be the best, she wants to be the only. This psychological need for absolute control stems from a deep-seated arrogance, a belief that she is the only competent person in a province of fools. And to be fair, looking at the AI pathfinding of your average Skyrim citizen, walking repeatedly into a wall, she might have a point. But jokes aside, this arrogance drives her to crush rivals not just out of greed, but out of spite. She takes personal offence to the idea that someone else might brew mead in her city. It's an insult. It's a blemish on her perfect record of domination. This is why the existence of any other meadery, no matter how small or insignificant, is treated as a declaration of war. It is a quiet war. It is fought with poisoned vats, bribed captains, and falsified ledgers. It is a war of attrition where the casualties are livelihoods rather than lives, though lives are certainly taken when necessary. Maven operates like a modern mob boss dropped into a medieval fantasy setting. While the Jarls play at being kings and queens, posturing with their axes and their ancient traditions, Maven is playing a spreadsheet game. She understands that gold is sharper than steel. You can block a sword, but you cannot block a foreclosure. As we look out over the gloomy waters of Lake Honrich from the back deck of the Meadery, watching the water wheels churn the dark current, we get a sense of the scale of her ambition. She wants it all: the land, the law, and the liquor. And for the most part, she has it. The Black-Briar crest is stamped on the barrels, on the guards' shields, metaphorically speaking, and on the soul of the city. But a monopoly is a fragile thing. It requires constant maintenance. It requires the relentless crushing of dissent. And just across the tundra, near the glittering city of Whiterun, a challenge has arisen. A small, upstart meadery with a charismatic owner and a secret recipe that is starting to turn heads. This, of course, simply cannot stand. The gears of the Black-Briar machine are turning, shifting focus from maintenance to destruction. The shadow of Riften is about to stretch all the way to Whiterun, and it brings with it a pestilence that no amount of prayer to Kinnereth can cure. It's one thing to own the market, it's another to actively salt the earth so nothing else can grow. If Maven's control over Riften is the shield, her offensive against Honningbrew Meadery is the sword. We move now from the established dominance of the Black-Briars to a specific case study in corporate warfare, Skyrim style. This is the systemic sabotage of Honningbrew Meadery, a masterclass in how to dismantle a competitor without ever unsheathing a weapon. Honningbrew Meadery sits just south of Whiterun, a prime location right on the main road. It's cleaner, brighter, and seemingly friendlier than the dank industrial complex in Riften. Its owner, Sæbjorn, is an ambitious man. He's proud, perhaps a bit arrogant himself, and he has managed to secure a tasting for the commander of the Imperial Guard, Caius. This is his big break. If the Legion contracts with Honningbrew instead of Black-Briar, Maven loses a massive guaranteed revenue stream. In the business world, this is competition. In Maven's world, this is a capital offence. This brings us to one of the most memorable quests in the Thieves Guild storyline, Dampened Spirits. Maven doesn't send a battalion of mercenaries to burn Honningbrew to the ground. That would be messy. It would draw attention. It would look like exactly what it is, a crime. Instead, she employs a far more insidious method. She hires the Thieves Guild, specifically you, the player, to ruin the product from the inside. The plan is devilishly simple. Sæbjorn has a pest problem. Skeever rats are gnawing at his grain and potentially getting into the vats. He's trying to handle it quietly to avoid a health inspection disaster. Maven leverages this. She has you pose as an exterminator offering to solve his problem, but the solution involves poisoning the nest not just to kill the skeevers, but to contaminate the brewing vats themselves. Here is the core in-game fact that anchors this section. You're given a specialised poison to pour into the Honningbrew brewing vat. Later, during the big tasting event with Commander Caius, the commander takes a swig, spits it out in disgust, and immediately arrests Sæbjorn for attempting to poison a Legion officer. It's a beautifully orchestrated frame-up. Sæbjorn isn't just put out of business, he's branded a criminal and thrown in the Dragon's Reach dungeon. But let's look closer at the mechanics of this sabotage. It requires a level of cruelty that goes beyond simple rivalry. Sæbjorn is a man who seemingly just wants to make good mead. He's not a saint. He treats his worker, Malus Maccius, quite poorly, but he doesn't deserve to be destroyed by a criminal syndicate. Yet Maven exploits that very relationship. She turns Malus, the disgruntled employee, into her inside man. She promises him control of the meadery once Sæbjorn is out of the picture. This is classic espionage. Find the unhappy subordinate, offer them power, and use them to topple the leader. The pestilence mentioned isn't just the skeevers, it's the metaphorical rot Maven introduces. She creates a problem, or exacerbates an existing one, and then provides a poisoned solution. The skeevers in the basement of Honningbrew aren't just normal rats either. If you go down there, you find a madman named Hamlin who is breeding them, creating a literal army of vermin. Now, did Maven plant Hamlin there? It's unlikely she put a crazy wizard in the basement personally, but she certainly knew about the infestation and chose to let it fester until it could be weaponized. She monitors her enemy's weaknesses and strikes exactly when that weakness is most exposed. There is a fascinating obscure lore tidbit found in a letter during this quest. If you search Sæbjorn's private dresser, you find a promissory note. it reveals that Sabjorn actually borrowed gold from Maven to start his business. Yes, you heard that right. Maven Black-Briar funded her own competition. Why? Because she plays the long game. She lends money to upstarts, lets them take all the risk of building the infrastructure and establishing the customer base. And then, when they can't pay or become too successful, she calls in the debt or sabotages them to seize the assets. She didn't just want Honningbrew destroyed, she wanted to acquire it. By the end of the quest, the Black-Briar family effectively owns the facility, with Malice acting as a puppet manager. It's a hostile takeover funded by the victim's own debt. This reveals Maven's true genius. She doesn't build, she annexes. She lets Sabjorn do all the hard work of setting up a meadery near Whiterun, a lucrative market she hadn't fully tapped, and then she simply took it from him. It's the business equivalent of spawn camping. You wait for the other player to do the work and then you snipe them and take their loot. The corruption of the guard captain, Commander Caius, is the final piece of this puzzle. Caius is the one who tastes the mead. Now, in the game, he genuinely seems to react to the poison. He gets sick. But let's consider the implications. Maven needed this tasting to go wrong. Was Caius truly impartial, or was he already looking for an excuse to shut Sabjorn down? While the poison forced his hand, we know Maven has deep ties to the Empire. It's entirely possible that even if the mead had been perfect, Caius would have found something wrong with it. This cork is substandard. Arrest him. The poison was just the insurance policy to make the failure undeniable and public. This event sparks a lot of debate among fans regarding the morality of the Dragonborn. This is one of those quests where you, the player, are undeniably the bad guy. You're ruining a man's life for a few gold coins and favour with the Thieves Guild. There is no greater good here. You aren't saving the world from Alduin. You are helping a monopolist crush a small business owner. It's a gritty, grounded kind of evil that feels more real than fighting dragons. It forces the player to be complicit in the Black-Briar corruption. And let's talk about the aftermath. If you visit Honningbrew Meadery after the quest, it has been rebranded. It is now Black-Briar Meadery West. Unofficially, of course, but the product lineup has changed. Malice is in charge and he is terrified of Maven. The quality of the mead likely drops to match the standard Black-Briar swill. The diversity of the market has been reduced. The consumer loses. Sabjorn loses. The only winner is the bank account in Riften. There is also a subtle environmental storytelling detail in the basement of Honningbrew after the takeover. The place is cleaner. The Mad Wizard is gone. The Skeevers are gone. It shows that Maven can run a clean ship when she wants to. The infestation was allowed to exist only as long as it served her purpose to discredit Sabjorn. Once the asset was hers, she cleaned it up. This proves that the sabotage was a calculated, temporary measure, not a result of general incompetence in the brewing industry. The destruction of Honningbrew is a microcosm of how the Black-Briars operate on a macro scale. They identify a threat, they infiltrate it, they corrupt it from within using disgruntled insiders, and then they use the law, which they have also corrupted, to deliver the final blow. It is a pincer movement of criminal activity and legal enforcement. Sabjorn never stood a chance. He thought he was playing a game of make the best mead. He didn't realise he was playing survive the shark tank, and he was the only one in the water without a cage. What's truly chilling is the casual nature of it all. Maven doesn't gloat about this victory. To her, crushing Sabjorn is as routine as doing inventory. It's just another Tuesday. There is no passion in her malice here, only efficiency. She saw a number on a ledger that she didn't like and she erased it. The fact that the number was a human. Being with dreams and years of hard work behind him is irrelevant. This calculated destruction serves as a warning to anyone else in Skyrim thinking of brewing a batch of ale in their bathtub. The message is clear. You brew at the pleasure of Maven Black-Briar. If you get too big, if you get too good, or if you simply get in the way, you will find poison in your vat and a guard at your door. The monopoly is absolute, and it is enforced with a smile, a handshake, and a vial of potent toxins. As the sun sets over the now disgraced Honningbrew Meadery, the sign creaking in the wind, we leave the wreckage of Sabjorn's dream. But if you think the treatment of competitors is harsh, wait until you see how the Black-Briar family treats its own employees. The walls of the Riften Meadery hide more than just secret formulas. They hide a labour force living in a nightmare of endless toil and fear. The boss, a dark elf named Indurin, has a management style that makes a Draugr Deathlord look like a grief counsellor. The air inside the Black-Briar Meadery is thick enough to chew. It hits you the moment you push open those heavy double doors, a wall of heat, the cloying sweetness of fermenting honey, and the sharp, stinging scent of unwashed bodies. If the streets of Riften are the gutters of Skyrim, the floor of the Meadery is the grate where everything eventually drains. We've seen how Maven destroys her external enemies, but now we must turn our gaze inward to the people who actually spin the wheels of her empire. We're talking about the workforce, and specifically, the brutal regime of the Meadery's foreman, Ingun. In any modern business, the phrase human resources implies a department dedicated to managing personnel. In the Black-Briar business model, human resources are simply resources to be used up and discarded, much like the juniper berries and honeycomb. The man charged with squeezing every drop of productivity out of this stone is Ingun, a dark elf with a temperament that makes a mud crab look cuddly. Ingun is a fascinating case study in the psychology of oppression. He is a Dunmer in a city that, while not as overtly segregated as Windhelm, is still deeply stratified. Yet, instead of finding solidarity with his fellow elves who toil in the canals and the Grey Quarter, Ingun has chosen to align himself with the oppressor. He is the classic middle management from Oblivion. He has a position of slight authority, and he wields it like a cudgel, likely because he knows that if he slips up even once, Maven will replace him in a heartbeat, probably literally by stopping his heart. Let's look at the core in-game fact that defines the working conditions here. If you stand in the main brewing room and just listen, an act known as eavesdropping, or as I like to call it, lore gathering, you will hear Indarin berating his employee, Ingun. It's a loop of dialogue that is etched into the minds of anyone who has spent time looting the barrels here. Indarin threatens Ingun with the most severe punishments for the slightest perceived laziness. He explicitly mentions that if production quotas aren't met, it's not just a pay dock they're facing, it's the wrath of Maven Black-Briar. And when Indarin says wrath, he isn't talking about a sternly worded memo, he's talking about the lake. There is a specific line where Indarin asks Ingun if he'd like to explain to Maven why the batch is short. Ingun, sounding like a man on the verge of a nervous breakdown, stammers a terrifying "No, please!" It's a moment of genuine raw fear. It tells us that the workers here aren't motivated by a paycheck or pride in their craft. They are motivated by the visceral terror of their employer. They are brewing for their lives. This brings us to an obscure lore tidbit regarding the schedule and sleeping arrangements of these workers. If you track the NPCs like Niluva Hlalu or Romlin Dreth, you'll notice their routines are grueling. But look at where they live. Romlin lives in the Ratway Warrens, literally a sewer dungeon beneath the city, and Niluva sleeps in the bunkhouse or the beggar's row. Despite working for the most profitable company in Skyrim, these elves are destitute. This implies that the wages Maven pays are effectively starvation wages. She pays them just enough to keep them alive and working, but not enough to ever leave Riften or improve their station. It is a system of economic entrapment that mirrors indentured servitude. The conditions on the Meadery floor are a safety inspector's fever dream. There are open vats of boiling liquid, rickety catwalks with no railings, and heavy barrels being moved by hand. If an employee falls into a vat, well, that just adds a little extra body to the vintage, doesn't it? I'm kidding, of course. Mostly. But the complete lack of regard for worker safety is palpable. You don't see any restoration potions on the shelves for injured workers. You don't see any shrines to Archay for those who pass on. You just see the product. The mead must flow, regardless of the human or elven cost. This dynamic sparks a very interesting fan theory and community debate regarding the social structures of Skyrim cities. Players often vilify Ulfric Stormcloak for the segregation of the Dark Elves in Windhelm's Grey Quarter, and rightly so. It's a frozen ghetto. However, many lore enthusiasts argue that Riften, under the Imperial-aligned and Black-Briar-controlled system, is actually worse for the Dunmer. In Windhelm, they are ignored and isolated. In Riften, they are actively exploited. Maven specifically employs Dark Elves in the Meadery not out of diversity and inclusion, but because they are refugees with nowhere else to go. She can pay them less and work them harder because they have no social safety net. It's a debate between malignant neglect, Windhelm, and predatory exploitation, Riften, which is the lesser of two evils. It's a grim choice, like deciding whether you'd rather be eaten by a frost troll or a saber cat. Indarin serves as the buffer for Maven's conscience, if she had one. By having a cruel foreman, Maven doesn't have to dirty her hands with the day-to-day misery of her workers. She can sit in her manor drinking fine wine while Indurin screams at Ungrian until the poor elf is shaking. It's a layer of insulation. If a worker dies or snaps, Maven can simply blame Indarin's mismanagement. Good help is so hard to find, she might sigh, stepping over the body. There is also the matter of Romlin Dreth, another worker at the Meadery. Unlike Ungrian, who cowers, Romlin steals. He runs a side business selling Black-Briar mead cheap out of the back door. He claims he finds the kegs. Now usually stealing from the Mafia is a suicide mission. But Romlin has survived this long. Likely because Indarin is too focused on terrorising the weak to notice the thief, right under his nose. Or perhaps, and this is darker, Indurin knows, perhaps the wages are so low that petty theft is the only way the workforce survives, and management turns a blind eye as long as the main quotas are met. It's a corruption that rots the entire structure from the bottom up. When you walk through the Meadery, pay attention to the ambient noise, the grinding of the mill, the bubbling of the vats. It's designed to be oppressive. There is no music, no bard playing a lute in the corner, just the mechanical heartbeat of industry. And Indarin's voice cuts through it all. He is a man who has sold his soul for a slice of power. He likely hates himself as much as his workers hate him, but he's trapped. To leave the Black-Briar employ is to become a target. He knows too much. He knows where the bodies are buried. Hell, he probably dug a few of the holes, so he doubles down on the cruelty, proving his loyalty with every lash of his tongue. It's worth noting the physical toll this work takes. Brewing is hard labour, hauling grain, scrubbing vats, moving heavy barrels, doing this for 12 to 14 hours a day on a diet of what I can only assume is stale bread and fear would break anyone. The workers we see are the survivors. How many didn't make it? How many slipped on the wet floor and retired early? The turnover rate at the Black-Briar Meadery is a statistic I'm sure Maven keeps hidden in a very secure safe. Even the architecture of the Meadery reinforces this hierarchy. The office overlooks the work floor. Indurin can stand up there, looking down like a petty god, watching every move. It's a panopticon of brewing. There is no privacy, no moment of rest where you aren't being watched. This psychological pressure is constant. It ensures that even when the boss isn't in the room, the workers police themselves. They are too afraid to slack off, too afraid to organise, too afraid to speak out. And let's be honest, if you were working for a woman who has the Dark Brotherhood on speed dial and the Thieves Guild as her personal repo men, would you ask for a raise? I didn't think so. You'd keep your head down, stir the mash, and pray that today isn't the day Indarin decides to make an example of you. The Meadery is a microcosm of Riften itself, a beautiful golden product produced by a miserable dark process. The bottle of Black-Briar mead you buy in Solitude or Whiterun carries with it the invisible weight of this suffering. Every sip is a testament to Indurin's cruelty and Maven's greed. It tastes of honey, yes, but if you have a sensitive palate, you might catch the notes of sweat, tears, and the damp despair of the rift. But Indurin is just a tool. He is a blunt instrument used to beat the workforce into submission. The Black-Briar family has other tools, other members who serve different, more specific purposes in Maven's grand design. If Indurin is the whip, then Maven's eldest son Hemming is the sledgehammer. He lacks his mother's subtlety and his sister's intellect, but he makes up for it with a blind, dog-like loyalty and a willingness to do the dirty work that doesn't require a brain, only a blade. We must now leave the stifling heat of the Meadery floor and ascend to the manor where the bloodline continues. But be warned, just because Hemming Black-Briar is rich doesn't mean he's refined. In fact, he might be the most dangerous kind of monster. A violent man with immunity from the law and a desperate need to please his mother. When we talk about dynasties, we usually imagine a lineage where talent and intelligence are passed down like a treasured heirloom. In the case of the Black-Briars, Maven seems to have hoarded all the intellect for herself and distributed only her ruthlessness to her children. Nowhere is this more apparent than in her eldest son, Hemming Black-Briar. If Maven is the brain of the operation, cold and calculating, Hemming is the muscle. Though, to be fair, he's a muscle that has atrophied slightly from too much fine wine and too little actual combat. Hemming Black-Briar occupies a strange space in the family hierarchy. He is the heir apparent, the man who should theoretically take over the empire when Maven passes, assuming she ever does. Lichdom wouldn't be out of character for her. Yet he commands absolutely no respect. Not from the citizens of Riften, not from the guild, and certainly not from his mother. He is a man perpetually auditioning for a role he has already been, cast in desperate to prove that he is more than just a genetic placeholder. Let's look at his core in-game fact. Hemming spends his days shadowing his mother. You almost never see him alone. He stands by her side in the mist-shrouded marketplace, or leans against the wall in the Bee and Barb while she conducts business. His dialogue is a broken record of sycophancy. He constantly brags about his family's power, saying things like, "My mother has the Jarl's ear and the guards in her pocket." He is the classic, "Do you know who my father is?" character, except in this case it's, "Do you know who my mother is?" But there is a darker edge to his boasting. He doesn't just brag about wealth, he brags about violence. He explicitly states his desire to kill for his mother. "I'm training to be a master swordsman," he claims, "so I can protect the family." It sounds noble until you realise who he wants to protect them from. Shopkeepers who pay late, rivals who undercut prices, and random adventurers who look at him funny. He isn't training for honour, he's training to be an enforcer. He is the Luca Brasi of Riften, minus the competence. This brings us to an obscure lore tidbit that is often overlooked because Hemming is so easy to dismiss as a fool. If you listen closely to his conversations with Maven, you hear her openly mocking him. She doesn't just correct him, she humiliates him. In one interaction, Hemming offers to take care of a problem for her, implying a violent solution. Maven shuts him down instantly, telling him he'd only make a mess of it. This reveals a critical dynamic. Maven knows her son is a blunt instrument. She keeps him on a short leash not because she fears for his safety, but because she fears his stupidity will ruin her carefully laid plans. He's a liability she can't fire because he's family. Hemming's violence is untempered by strategy. While Maven might order a hit to secure a trade route, Hemming would kill a man for spilling a drink. He represents the chaotic, uncontrolled ID of the Black-Briar family. If Maven were removed from the equation, Hemming wouldn't be able to maintain the Empire for a week. He would likely start a war in the streets of Riften that would end with the Imperial Legion marching in to restore order and seizing the Meadery in the process. There is a fascinating fan theory or community debate surrounding Hemming's father. We never see a Mr. Black-Briar. Hemming mentions his father only once, in a passing comment about how he learned to fight. Some fans speculate that Maven killed her husband to take full control. Others believe he was simply a weak man who died of natural causes, or natural causes, Black-Briar style. But the most interesting theory suggests that Hemming's desperate need for approval stems from the absence of a father figure. He is trying to fill a void by becoming the man of the house, but he has no role model other than his sociopathic mother. He tries to emulate her strength but only manages to mimic her cruelty. Hemming's training is also a point of ridicule. He claims to be a swordsman, yet he wears fine clothes and carries a weapon that looks like it's never struck anything harder than a cheese wheel. In combat, if you attack the family, he goes down faster than a level 1 skeever. This disconnect between his self-image and reality is delusional. He lives in a fantasy world where he is a dangerous warrior prince, while everyone else sees him as a pampered man-child with a temper. But we shouldn't underestimate the danger of a fool with power. Hemming might be incompetent, but he has the authority to command guards, unofficially, and hire thugs. His unpredictability makes him dangerous. You can reason with Maven, she understands self-interest. You cannot reason with Hemming because he operates on ego. If he feels slighted, he will lash out, consequences be damned. This makes him a terrifying wildcard in Riften's political landscape. Consider his relationship with his siblings. He seems entirely disconnected from them. Sibbi is in jail, we'll get to him, and Ingun is in the basement mixing poisons. Hemming is the only one free to walk the city, yet he is arguably the most trapped. He is trapped in his mother's shadow, forever the pupil, never the master. His existence is a perpetual state of waiting. Waiting for a command, waiting for approval, waiting for a power he is woefully unequipped to wield. We also see Hemming's role in the Civil War politics. When Maven attends the Peace Council at High Hrothgar or moves to the Blue Palace if the Imperials take the Rift, Hemming is there, like a piece of luggage. He has no lines, no input. He is a prop. This silence speaks volumes. Even in the highest halls of power amidst generals and jarls, Hemming is irrelevant. He is there only because his name is Black-Briar. It must gnaw at him. It must burn. And that pent-up frustration has to go somewhere. It likely goes into the accidents that happen in Riften's back alleys. While we have no direct quest confirming it, it is easy to imagine Hemming practicing his swordsmanship on a beggar or a debtor who couldn't pay up. The guards would look the other way. The body would disappear into the canal, and Hemming would return to the manor feeling a fleeting sense of power before his mother tells him to shut up and pour her a drink. Hemming is a tragic figure, in a twisted way. He is a monster made, not born. Raised by a shark, he tried to grow teeth, but he only managed to grow a loud bark. He is a reminder that evil isn't always brilliant or calculating. Sometimes it's just dumb, entitled, and armed. He is the Fredo Corleone of the Black-Briar family, weak, eager to please, and ultimately a liability. But unlike Fredo, Hemming hasn't betrayed the family yet. His betrayal is his incompetence. He is the crack in the foundation. If the Black-Briar Empire ever falls, it won't be because of a clever scheme by the Silverbloods or a raid by the Dawn Guard. It will be because Maven trusted Hemming with something important, and he dropped it. So, when you see him strutting through the Riften market, sneering at the commoners, don't just see a generic rich NPC. See a man who is terrified of his own irrelevance. See a man who is one bad day away from doing something horrific just to prove he matters. He is the violent heir apparent to a throne he cannot hold, a king without a crown, a warrior without a war. But if you think Hemming is a disappointment, wait until we visit the city jail. At least Hemming has the decency to stay out of a cell. His younger brother Sibbi hasn't been so lucky. Or perhaps luck has nothing to do with it. Sibbi Black-Briar is currently a guest of the Riften dungeon, but let me tell you, his cell looks less like a prison and more like a budget hotel suite. While other prisoners rot on haymats, Sibbi is living a life of relative luxury, proving that in Riften, justice is just another commodity you can buy if you have enough coin. If Hemming is the dog that barks at the gate, Sibbi Black-Briar is the wolf resting comfortably in the kennel, waiting for his next meal to be delivered on a silver platter. We leave the sun-dappled streets of Riften and descend into the cool, damp stone of the Mistvale Keep dungeon. Usually a trip to a Skyrim jail is a punishment. It means losing your progress toward the next level, having your stolen goods confiscated, and sleeping on a bedroll that smells of ancient Nord sweat and mildew. But for a Black-Briar, prison is not a punishment. It is merely a change of address. Sibbi Black-Briar represents the absolute pinnacle of privilege. He is currently serving time for murder, a fact he does not shy away from, yet his experience of incarceration is vastly different from that of the common criminal. When you walk down the stairs into the jail, you expect the usual sights: despair, rats, and guards patrolling with grim faces, and you do find those things right up until you reach Sibbi's cell. Here is the core in-game fact that immediately shatters the illusion of justice in the Rift. Sibbi's cell is furnished. I don't mean it has a slightly less lumpy pile of straw, I mean it has actual furniture. He has a real bed, a chest for his personal belongings, and fine clothes. He isn't wearing the rough-spun rags of a prisoner. He's dressed in noble attire, looking like he just stepped out of a banquet at the Blue Palace. He lounges there, utterly relaxed, treating the heavy iron bars not as a cage but as a partition for his privacy. The guards don't treat him like an inmate. They treat him like a VIP guest who has simply lost his room key. The jailer, who is ostensibly there to keep dangerous criminals from escaping, acts more like a concierge. If you want to speak to Sibbi, you often have to bribe or persuade the guard, not because Sibbi is in solitary confinement, but because he is receiving visitors. It frames the interaction not as a visitation to a convict, but as an audience with a lord. Sibbi's demeanour reinforces this. When you speak to him, there is no contrition, no fear, and certainly no rehabilitation happening. He speaks with the arrogant drawl of a man who knows the game is rigged in his favour. He describes his imprisonment as a minor inconvenience, a temporary political necessity rather than a consequence of his actions. He practically winks at the camera, acknowledging that while the law says he must be punished, his last name says he must be comfortable. This luxury prison setup serves a dual purpose for the Black-Briar family. First, it maintains the illusion that the law still functions in Riften. Look, the Jarl can say, even a Black-Briar goes to jail when they kill someone. It appeases the common folk who might otherwise riot if a murderer was allowed to walk free immediately. But secondly, it demonstrates to the underworld that the Black-Briars are untouchable even when they are touched. You can put Them in a cage, but you cannot strip them of their power or their comfort. It is a flex. It is Maven telling the world, I will let you pretend to punish my son, but don't forget who owns the jail. This brings us to a fascinating obscure lore tidbit found in the dialogue trees that many players skip. Sibbi isn't just sitting in there twiddling his thumbs, he is actively conducting business. He's still managing family affairs and even hiring mercenaries. That's you, the Dragonborn, to do his dirty work. He initiates the quest promises to keep from inside his cell. Think about the absurdity of that. A prisoner is hiring an adventurer to steal a horse, the legendary Frost, and falsify lineage papers, effectively coordinating a grand theft auto operation from behind bars. The fact that he can arrange payment, coordinate with outside contacts like Louis Latrouche, and receive updates on the mission suggests that his communication with the outside world is completely unfettered. The guards are likely passing his messages. His visitors are likely lieutenants in his criminal schemes. The Mistveil Keep dungeon is essentially his field office. He has simply traded a view of the lake for a view of the torture rack, and frankly, he doesn't seem to mind the change of scenery. There is a dark humour to his situation. Sibbi complains about the food, but not in the way a starving prisoner would. He complains about the quality of the roast, or the vintage of the wine. It implies that meals are being brought in from the Black-Briar Manor or the Bee and Barb, bypassing the standard prison gruel entirely. One can imagine a guard carrying a tray with a covered dish down the stairs, stepping over a sleeping drunk in the next cell, and serving Sibbi his dinner with a polite nod. It is a grotesque parody of incarceration. The fan community has long debated the nature of Sibbi's imprisonment. A popular fan theory suggests that Maven put him there not to punish him, but to protect him. Sibbi is a loose cannon. He killed a man, the brother of his fiancée, in a fit of rage. By locking him up, Maven keeps him away from the vengeful family of the victim and prevents him from causing more public embarrassments while the heat dies down. It's an involuntary vacation. It's an adult timeout. The luxury of the cell supports this. Maven wants him contained, not suffering. She's managing a PR crisis, not enforcing the penal code. However, there is a counter-theory that Sibbi is safer inside than outside because of Maven herself. Some believe Sibbi actually prefers the jail because it is the one place his mother is less likely to physically accost him. Out in the manor, he is subject to her withering glares and direct verbal abuse. In the jail, he is the king of his own little castle. He has his own domain where he can pretend to be the big man, bossing around the guards and the Dragonborn, free from the immediate oversight of the matriarch. It's a twisted form of independence. Let's not forget the other prisoners. In the same dungeon, just a few feet away, you might find a thief rotting in rags begging for a lockpick. The juxtaposition is intentional. Bethesda designed this space to visually represent the corruption of Riften. The law applies to the poor, it negotiates with the rich. Sibbi's cell is a physical manifestation of the class divide. He is separated from the common rabble, not just by bars, but by the quality of his mattress. Sibbi's attitude toward his crime is also telling. He admits to the murder freely. He doesn't claim innocence, he claims provocation. He frames the narrative to make himself the victim of a betrayal. This narcissism is a key Black-Briar trait. In his mind, he didn't commit a cold-blooded killing. He was forced to act because someone disrespected him. And because he is a Black-Briar, his definition of disrespect warrants a death sentence. The jail guards, by allowing luxury, implicitly validate his worldview. They are saying, yes, Sibbi, we understand, these things happen. The Promises to Keep quest also reveals that Sibbi has his own stash of wealth hidden away. He offers you the stash as a reward, or offers you the horse itself if you double-cross his partner. This proves he still controls assets. His bank accounts haven't been frozen, his property hasn't been seized. He's a convicted felon with full access to his portfolio. It renders the concept of paying one's debt to society laughable. Sibbi isn't paying anything. Society is paying to house and feed him in the style to which he's accustomed. Even his dialogue with the player is dripping with entitlement. He calls you over like a servant. You there, come here. He assumes you want to help him because why wouldn't you? He's a Black-Briar. The idea that you might be the Dragonborn, the saviour of the world, is irrelevant to him. In Riften, the only title that matters is his last name. He treats the hero of Skyrim like a hired hand because in his experience, everyone is for sale. This section of the story highlights the absolute moral decay of the Rift's institutions. The Jarl, Layla Lawgiver, claims to want justice, but she presides over a keep where the most high-profile prisoner is living better than most of her guards. She's either woefully ignorant of what happens in her own dungeon, which is likely, given her character, or she is complicit. The corruption is so systemic that it has become architectural. The jail was built to hold criminals, but it has been modified to house a prince. As we leave Sibbi to his fine wine and his delusions of grandeur, we must ask ourselves, what kind of crime lands a man like this in jail yet keeps him so comfortable? Sibbi casually mentions he killed a man, but the story is far more complex and far more tragic than a simple bar brawl gone wrong. The reason Sibbi is in that cell involves a tale of obsession, a hunted woman, and a love that turned into a lethal fixation. Sibbi isn't just a spoiled brat, he is a predator, and his prey is still out there, hiding in the shadows of the Reach, praying that the bars of Riften Jail hold strong. The iron bars of the Riften Jail may keep Sibbi Black-Briar's body confined, but his malice has a reach that extends far beyond the stone walls of Mistveil Keep. While he sits on his comfortable bed, sipping wine that costs more than a guard's yearly salary, his mind is fixated on one thing. It isn't his business, it isn't his family, and it certainly isn't remorse. It is a woman. Her name is Svidi, though if you've spent any time listening to the gentle strumming of a lute in a quiet inn at the base of the throat of the world, you might know her by a different name. This brings us to one of the most unsettling narratives tucked away in the miscellaneous quest log of the Dragonborn. It starts innocuously enough. Sibbi, playing the role of the heartbroken lover, asks a favour. He tells you about his fiancée Svidi. He spins a tale of woe, claiming that she left him because of the murder he committed. He frames it as a misunderstanding, a tragedy where he lost his temper, and now, in the solitude of his cell, he only wants to find her to apologise. He wants to make things right. He wants closure. It sounds reasonable, doesn't it? A man seeking redemption. But the moment you scratch the surface of Sibbi's story, the rot beneath is revealed. Sibbi isn't looking for forgiveness, he is looking for a target. The man he killed wasn't a random stranger. It was Svidi's brother, Wolfwild. And why did he kill Wolfwild? Because the brother tried to stop Sibbi from beating Svidi. Let that sink in. The crime of passion. Sibbi is so casual about was the murder of a man defending his sister from domestic abuse. Svidi didn't leave because she was embarrassed by his arrest. She fled for her life because the monster she was engaged to had just butchered her protector. Sibbi's search is not a quest for love, it is a manhunt. He views Svidi not as a person who left him, but as property that has been misplaced. And the Black-Briars do not lose property. The trail leads away from the grime of Riften, up the winding, bear-infested slopes of the Rift, to the sleepy village of Everstead. This is a place of pilgrims and peace, the last stop before the 7,000 steps to High Hrothgar. Inside the Villamere Inn, a young bard named Linley Starsung plays for the weary travellers. She's quiet, unassuming, and seemingly terrified of her own shadow. Here is the core in-game fact that drives this dark drama. Linley Starsung is Svidi. She has changed her name, dyed her hair, metaphorically speaking, game mechanics notwithstanding, and hidden herself in one of the most isolated villages in Skyrim. When you confront her with Sibbi's accusations, the facade crumbles instantly. She breaks down. The terror in her voice is palpable. She confirms the horror of her past, that Sibbi is a possessive, violent sociopath who treated her like a caged bird. She tells you that if he finds her, he won't apologise. He will kill her. This moment presents the player with a stark moral choice, one of the few in the game that feels genuinely heavy despite being a minor side quest. You hold a woman's life in your hands. You can return to Riften and tell Sibbi exactly where she is, sealing her fate. Or you can lie. You can use your speech skill to convince the predator that his prey has fled to Morrowind or Cyrodiil far beyond his reach. The dialogue with Linley reveals the depth of her trauma. She speaks of Sibbi's jealousy, how he wouldn't let her speak to other men, how he controlled her every move. It paints a portrait of a classic abuser, escalated to a lethal degree by the political immunity his family enjoys. In any other hold, Sibbi would have been hanged. In Riften, he was merely given a timeout, leaving Svidi to live in perpetual fear that the timeout would end, or that his long arm would find her even while he sat in a cell. There is a disturbing, obscure lore tidbit hidden in the dialogue options if you choose to betray her. If you tell Sibbi that Sviddy is in Everstead, his reaction is chilling. He doesn't thank you for reuniting lovers. He doesn't speak of romance. He says, "I'll have to send someone to pay her a visit." The euphemism is thin. He might as well have said, "I will send an assassin." He then rewards you with a key to his stash, effectively paying you blood money. The closure he wanted was the closure of a coffin lid. This quest sparks a significant amount of community debate regarding the role of the Dragonborn as a mercenary. Many players, in their first playthrough, instinctively help Sibbi because the quest log frames it as "locate Sviddy." We are conditioned by games to complete the objective. The good outcome, lying to Sibbi, actually requires you to fail the literal instruction of the quest giver. It forces you to read between the lines, to judge the character of the man asking for help. It is a subtle test of the player's moral compass. Are you a hero who protects the weak, or are you just an errand boy for whoever has the most gold? Furthermore, there is the tragedy of Linley's location. Everstead is a town in decline. The local economy is stagnant, relying entirely on the few pilgrims who pass through. Linley is hiding in a dying town, singing songs to farmers and tired guards, constantly looking over her shoulder. Every time the door to the Villamere Inn opens, she must wonder, is this him? Is this the mercenary he sent? It is a life of psychological torture. She's a prisoner in Everstead just as much as Sibbi is a prisoner in Riften, but her prison is built of fear, while his is built of privilege. The juxtaposition of the two characters is striking. Sibbi is surrounded by stone walls but feels completely free to act. Linley is in an open village surrounded by nature but feels completely trapped. It is a reversal of roles that highlights the true nature of power in Skyrim. Freedom isn't about where you are, it's about who you are. If you are Black-Briar, the world is yours to command. If you are a victim of a Black-Briar, the world is a very small, very dangerous place. Let's also consider the poetry of her disguise. A bard. She chose a profession where she has to stand in front of people, to be seen, to be heard. It's the worst possible cover for someone trying to disappear, yet it's likely the only skill she has to survive. Every night she sings "The Age of Aggression" or "The Dragonborn Comes," trying to blend in, trying to be just another piece of background noise in a noisy world. It adds a layer of desperate bravery to her character. She's hiding in plain sight. If you choose to protect her, and let's be honest, if you don't, you might need to reevaluate your role-playing choices. You have to return to the jail and look Sibbi in the eye. You have to lie to a man who detects lies for a living, and when you succeed, when you tell him she's gone, the frustration on his face is one of the most satisfying moments in the Riften questline. He is denied. For the first time in his life, perhaps, Sibbi Black-Briar does not get what he wants. He is left in his cell with his anger and his expensive wine, powerless to touch the woman who escaped him. But the darkness lingers. Even if you lie, Linley is never truly safe. As long as Sibbi breathes, as long as the Black-Briar family holds power, she can never go home. She can never stop running. You haven't saved her. You've just bought her time. You've given her a reprieve. It's a bleak victory, fitting for the grey morality of the Rift. There is a fan theory that suggests Sibbi knows you are lying. Some interpretations of his voice line suggest a lingering suspicion. "Morrowind, are you sure?" he asks. Perhaps he doesn't believe you, but simply lacks the resources at that moment to verify it, because he can't leave the cell himself. It implies that once he gets out, and he will get out eventually, money guarantees that, he will resume the hunt. The quest isn't closed, it's just paused. The horror story has a sequel that the game never shows us, but which we can all too easily imagine. Sibbi's obsession with Sviddy is a microcosm of the Black-Briar philosophy. Possession is absolute. You do not leave the family, you do not defy the family, and you certainly do not survive the family. It establishes Sibbi not just as a spoiled heir, but as a deeply dangerous man who views human beings as collectibles. As we leave the Villamere Inn, leaving Linley to her songs and her solitude, we realise that the Black-Briar poison has infected even this remote sanctuary. The shadow of the meadery stretches long in the evening sun, but Sibbi, for all his malice, is still just the crude instrument of the family's violence. There is another sibling, one who makes Sibbi look like a playground bully. She doesn't scream, she doesn't posture, and she doesn't care about business or marriage. She's quiet, she's studious, and she is, without a doubt, the most disturbingly broken member of the clan. We're heading back to the depths of Riften, to the alchemist's shop down by the canal. It's time to meet the middle child, Ingun Black-Briar. While the rest of the family is obsessed with accumulating gold and power, Ingun has a different obsession. She's interested in the delicate, beautiful art of stopping a heart from beating. We leave the dank cells of the jail and the tragic hideaways of Everstead to descend into a different kind of darkness. If Hemming is the brawn, and Sibbi is the ego, then Ingun Black-Briar is the family's cold, unblinking eye. She is the middle child, often forgotten by the citizens of Riften because she rarely causes a scene. You won't find her drunkenly brawling at the Bee and Barb or threatening merchants in the market. No, Ingun spends her days in the basement of Elgrim's elixirs, surrounded by dried herbs, pickling jars, and the heavy scent of formaldehyde. Ingun is a paradox. She's a Black-Briar, heir to a fortune built on social manipulation and commerce, yet she has absolutely no interest in the family business. She finds the Meadery boring, she finds politics tedious. What she finds fascinating, truly deeply fascinating, is the mechanics of death. Here is the core in-game fact that defines her character. When you first meet Ingun, she doesn't greet you with the usual Nord hospitality. She doesn't even greet you with the usual Black-Briar arrogance. Instead, she offers a chilling monologue about her passion. She tells you quite calmly, "My heart beats with the fury of a master alchemist." But it's not the creation of healing potions or stamina drafts that excites her. She explicitly states that she enjoys watching the effects of her concoctions on living things. She talks about the way a body spasms, how the eyes dilate, how the breath stops. It is clinical, it is detached, it is the dialogue of a budding serial killer who views murder as a science experiment rather than a crime. While her brothers are monsters of passion, rage, lust, greed, Ingun is a monster of curiosity. She represents a far more terrifying kind of evil, the evil that lacks empathy entirely. To her, a rat, a bandit, or perhaps even a sibling, is simply a biological machine that can be turned off with the right dosage of nightshade. She doesn't hate you, she just wants to see what happens if she puts a drop of jarrin root in your tea. This brings us to her personal quest. Few and far between. Most NPCs in Skyrim ask you to fetch things like lost swords, family heirlooms, or perhaps 10 bear pelts. Ingun asks for a shopping list of toxicity. She demands 20 Deathbell, 20 Nightshade, and 20 Nirnroot. Let's break that down. Deathbell is the primary ingredient for damage health poisons. Nightshade is infamous for its lethal properties and its association with the Dark Brotherhood. And Nirnroot? While it has various properties, in bulk, it's a powerful agent of chemical instability. She doesn't need 1 or 2 samples for a collection. She needs 20 of each. That is an industrial amount of poison. That is enough to wipe out the entire population of Riften 3 times over, and she claims it's for study. One has to wonder what exactly she's studying that requires such a high volume of lethal agents. Is she testing tolerance? Potency? Or is she stockpiling for a rainy day when the family needs to eliminate a small army without drawing a sword? There is an obscure lore tidbit found in the way she speaks about her mentor, Elgrim. Elgrim is an old, cranky alchemist who seems to regret taking her on as an apprentice. He complains that she wastes ingredients and doesn't respect the art. But Ingun's perspective is different. She sees Elgrim not as a master to be revered, but as a resource to be mined. She's impatient with his old ways and his caution. She wants to push the boundaries. There is a sense that she has already surpassed him in terms of raw ambition, if not skill. She's the student who scares the teacher because she asks questions like, "Yes, but how long does it take for the paralysis to become permanent?" Her relationship with Maven is also telling. Maven, who controls everything, seems to have given up on controlling Ingun. She lets the girl play in the basement. Perhaps Maven recognizes a kindred spirit, a coldness that matches her own. Or perhaps Maven is actually afraid of Ingun. It's a common trope in fiction. The crime boss who is terrified of their own quiet child. Maven understands greed and power. Those are rational motivations. She may not understand Ingun's pure, abstract obsession with mortality. You can bribe a greedy man, You can't bribe someone who just wants to watch your nervous system shut down. This leads to a compelling fan theory within the Elder Scrolls community. Many players speculate that Ingun Black-Briar is a prime candidate for the Dark Brotherhood, or perhaps she's already a consultant for them. Her obsession with Nightshade, the Brotherhood's signature plant, and her lack of moral qualms align perfectly with the chaotic, neutrally evil alignment of the Assassins. Some even theorize that Ingun is responsible for some of the unexplained deaths in the Rift. People who just fell ill and died in their sleep. It puts a sinister spin on her innocuous presence in the shop. Is she the supplier for the Brotherhood's contracts in the Eastern Hold? Furthermore, consider the contrast between her and the Dragonborn. You, the player, likely dabble in alchemy to make yourself stronger. You make potions to survive. Ingun makes potions to ensure others don't. She is the anti-healer. In a world of magic and resurrection, she is the agent of finality. Her dialogue also contains a subtle threat to the player. If you ask her about her family, she replies with a dismissive, "I have no interest in their petty squabbles." But then she adds that having the Black-Briar name has its privileges. This implies she uses the family wealth to fund her dark research. Those rare ingredients aren't cheap. Maven's gold is financing a one-woman chemical weapons program in the basement of a shop that sells cure disease potions. Visually, Ingun is often seen mixing at the alchemy table, the green light of the enchanting lab, if one is, nearby, or the bubbling vats casting a sickly glow on her face. She is focused, intense, and utterly absorbed. If you stand there and watch her, she ignores you. You're irrelevant unless you have her ingredients. It's a chilling depiction of a sociopath who views the world only through the lens of her utility function. There is also a dark irony in her location. She works in a shop that is technically a place of healing. Elgrim's Elixirs is where you go when you're sick, yet the person spending the most time there is designing new ways to make you sick. It's like finding a bomb maker working in the back of a hospital. It speaks to the pervasive corruption of Riften. Even the places of healing are tainted by the Black-Briar influence. If you complete her quest, she gives you a key to her supply chest. This chest refills with random potions. It's a nice gameplay reward, but lore-wise it's like a drug dealer giving you a sample. Here, she seems to say, have a taste of what I can do. It makes the player complicit. By using her potions, are we testing her latest batches in the field? Every time you use a poison on a bandit, are you providing Ingun with a data point? Ingun Black-Briar is a reminder that the most dangerous people aren't always the ones shouting threats. Sometimes they are the ones quietly grinding flowers in a mortar and pestle, humming a tune, dreaming of the perfect toxin. She is the silent threat, the one you don't see coming until your stamina drains to zero and your screen fades to black. But Ingun didn't learn this darkness in a vacuum. She had a teacher, and while she may be the prodigy, we must give credit, or blame, to the man who handed her the first vial of poison. We stay in the alchemist's shop for the next section, shifting our focus to the master himself. Elgrim appears to be just a grumpy old man, but his tutelage of Ingun reveals a negligence that borders on criminal. He is the one who opened the door to the abyss and Ingun walked right through it. We remain in the damp subterranean world of the canal level, where the sunlight struggles to reach and the water laps against the wooden pilings with a rhythmic hypnotic slosh. We are still inside Elgrim's Elixirs, but now we shift our focus from the prodigy to the master, or perhaps more accurately the prisoner and his warden. Elgrim is the proprietor of this shop, a fixture of Riften for as long as most can remember. He is an old man, his eyesight failing, his back bent from years of hunching over workstations, his fingers stained with the residue of 1,000 different reagents. He is the mentor to Ingun Black-Briar, but this is not the heartwarming tale of a wise old wizard passing down ancient knowledge to an eager young pupil. This is a story of captivity. It is a story of a man who has invited a viper into his nest and now finds himself too afraid to throw it out. Here is the core in-game fact that sets the stage. Elgrim is arguably the most miserable merchant in Skyrim. When you speak to him, he is short-tempered, dismissive, and constantly complaining. He grumbles about the dampness affecting his joints. He snaps at his wife, Hafjorg, who seems to be the only person actually keeping the business running, but most telling is his complaint about Ingun. He says, she has talent, I'll give her that, but she's impatient, she wastes ingredients. On the surface, this sounds like a standard teacher complaining about a student, But look closer. Elgrim is a perfectionist. He believes in the art of alchemy as a balanced discipline, a mix of healing, restoration, and alteration. Ingun, as we've established, only cares about destruction. Elgrim is trying to teach her the symphony of nature, and she's only interested in the notes that shatter glass. The tension in the shop is palpable. Elgrim knows that Ingun is twisting his teachings. He's teaching her how to extract the essence of a flower, and she is using that knowledge to extract the life from a body. The dark tutelage isn't necessarily that Elgrim is evil, it's that he is teaching dangerous knowledge to the wrong person. It's the equivalent of teaching nuclear physics to someone who keeps asking, "Yes, but how do I make it explode bigger?" Elgrim is trapped by the Black-Briar name. He cannot refuse to teach her. Imagine the conversation if he tried to expel Ingun. Maven would likely pay him a visit, or rather, send the Thieves Guild to empty his shop and break his legs. So he is forced to continue the lessons, watching helplessly as his craft is perverted into a tool for assassination. There is a fascinating obscure lore tidbit hidden in the shop's layout and inventory. If you look at the shelves in Elgrim's elixirs, you see a lot of poisons openly for sale alongside the healing potions. This is somewhat unique in Skyrim. Most alchemists sell mostly beneficial potions. Arcadia in Whiterun, for instance, focuses on health and cure disease. Elgrim stocks weak, aversion to fire, palsy, and damage magicka. This suggests that even before Ingun arrived, Elgrim had a clientele that required aggressive solutions. This opens up a dark possibility. Was Elgrim the original supplier for the Thieves Guild? Riften is a criminal hub. The guild uses poison on their weapons. They need a supplier. Elgrim is located conveniently on the lower deck, away from the prying eyes of the street level, right near the entrance to the Ratway. It is entirely possible that Elgrim's crankiness is the guilt of a man who has spent a lifetime arming criminals. Ingun isn't corrupting his shop. She is simply the natural successor to a business that was already grey. She is the escalation of his own moral compromises. This sparks a fan theory and community debate regarding the nature of alchemy in the Elder Scrolls universe. Is alchemy inherently neutral? We, the players, often eat ingredients to discover their effects. We munch on Daedra hearts and giants. Toes like their trail mix. But in the lore, alchemy is a precise and dangerous science. One wrong measurement turns a cure disease potion into a ravaged stamina poison. The line between healer and killer is razor thin. Fans argue that Elgrim represents this duality. He is a man straddling the line while Ingun has sprinted across it. The dynamic between Elgrim and his wife, Hafjorg, further highlights the tragedy. Hafjorg is the one who sends you to fetch ingredients because Elgrim is too frail or too stubborn to do it. She worries about him eating. She worries about the business. She is the anchor trying to keep the ship from drifting away. But Elgrim ignores her. He is consumed by his work and his frustration. He represents the archetype of the obsessed scholar, so focused on his vials and burners that he loses touch with humanity. This makes him the perfect, albeit unwilling, mentor for Ingun. She feeds on his detachment. She learns from him that the work is more important than the people. Let's talk about the poison mastery specifically. To make the poisons Ingun desires, using Deathbell, Nightshade and Nirnroot, requires a deep understanding of how to stabilize volatile compounds. Elgrim must be teaching her this. You don't just mash a Deathbell and get a lethal toxin. You have to distill it. You have to concentrate it. Elgrim is showing her the techniques of extraction and concentration. He is handing her the keys to the kingdom of death. There is a moment of dark humour in the game mechanics here. If you invest in the shop via the speech perk, Elgrim becomes friendly. He says, "May your mixture never clot." It's a standard alchemist blessing, but coming from him, it sounds ominous. A clotting mixture explodes. He's constantly living in fear of a volatile reaction, both chemical and interpersonal. We must also consider the physical toll on Elgrim. He mentions his eyesight is going. In a visual medium like alchemy, where colour, changes and texture are vital, this is a career-ending disability. He needs Ingun. He needs her young eyes to read the labels, to see the colour shift in the crucible. This dependency creates a toxic symbiosis. He hates what she is, but he needs her to function. She uses him for knowledge. He uses her for sight. It is a relationship built on mutual exploitation. And what of the painted cow theory? Some lore divers have pointed out that the ingredients Ingun requests are also used in the ritual to summon the Dark Brotherhood, specifically Nightshade. Is it possible Elgrim knows this? Is it possible that Ingun isn't just making poison, but preparing for the Black Sacrament? If Elgrim suspects this and says nothing, his complicity deepens. He becomes an accessory to the darkest magic in Tamriel simply by remaining silent. The atmosphere of the shop reinforces this narrative of decay. It is always dark. The firelight flickers on the stone walls, it feels like a dungeon. Unlike the warmth of the Bee and Barb or the open air of the market, Elgrim's Elixirs feels like a place where secrets are kept. It is a place of whispers and bubbling liquids. It is the perfect incubator for a monster. Elgrim's ultimate legacy won't be his shop or his potions, it will be Ingun. When he eventually dies, either from old age or from accidentally testing one of Ingun's new brews, she will likely take over. Or she will absorb his stock and move on. He is a stepping stone. He is the old guard being devoured by the new, ruthless generation of the Black-Briar philosophy. There is a sadness to Elgrim. He likely started with dreams of being a great healer, of discovering the elixir of life. Instead, he ends his days in a basement in Riften, teaching a sociopath how to kill more efficiently. It is a cautionary tale about the erosion of ethics. You compromise once, sell a poison to a thief. You compromise twice, take on a student because her mother is a tyrant, and before you know it, you are the architect of your own nightmare. As we leave the shop, the smell of sulphur and dried frost Miriam clinging to our clothes, we realise that the corruption of the Black-Briars isn't just about money or violence. It's about the corruption of knowledge. They take the sciences and the arts and twist them into weapons. But the family doesn't just operate in the city. They have retreats, they have safe houses, and their most significant holding outside the city walls is not a place of relaxation, but a fortress of secrets. We are leaving the city of Riften now, heading east into the autumnal forest, to a place that shouldn't exist on any honest map. We're going to the Black-Briar Lodge. It looks like a vacation home, but it is guarded like a military installation. And for good reason. It's where Maven keeps the things she doesn't want the Jarl to see. We leave the cloying fumes of Elgrim's basement and step out into the crisp, cool air of the Rift's wilderness. The journey takes us east, away from the city gates, along a winding dirt path that cuts through the golden aspen forests. It is a deceptively peaceful landscape. The leaves shimmer like gold coins in the wind, and the distant roar of a bear occasionally breaks the silence. But we are not here for a nature walk. We are heading toward the only structure in the Rift that is arguably more fortified than Mistvale Keep itself, the Black-Briar Lodge. To the casual observer, the lodge appears to be a wealthy noble's country retreat. It sits on a rise, commanding a beautiful view of the valley. It has timbered walls, a sturdy roof, and the look of a place where one might go to escape the noise of the city for a weekend of hunting and fine dining. But try to walk up to the front door, and you will quickly discover the reality. This is not a vacation home, it is a fortress. It is a private military installation masquerading as a chalet. Here is the core in-game fact that defines the lodge. It is not guarded by Riften City guards, it is guarded by Black-Briar mercenaries. These are not the lazy, sweet roll-eating guards you see in the city who complain about taking an arrow to the knee. These are heavily armoured, highly aggressive sellswords who attack on sight. There is no halt, citizen. There is no bounty to pay. If you step onto the property line, you are treated as a hostile invader. This distinction is crucial. It proves that Maven Black-Briar maintains a standing private army that operates completely outside the jurisdiction of the Jarl. Think about the implications of that. In a feudal society like Skyrim, the Jarl is supposed to hold the monopoly on violence. Only the Jarl's men should be patrolling and enforcing boundaries. Yet, here sits Maven, brazenly employing a paramilitary force on Skyrim soil. It is a state within a state. The Lodge is sovereign Black-Briar territory, where the laws of the Rift do not apply. If a mercenary kills you here, there is no investigation. You are simply trespassing on private property. The interior of the Lodge reflects this dual nature of luxury and lethality. The upper floors are appointed with the finest furniture, huge four-poster beds, expensive wardrobes, and tables set with silver platters. It smells of lavender and wealth. But downstairs in the basement, the atmosphere shifts. The air gets colder. The storage is vast. This is where the secrets are kept. This brings us to a fascinating obscure lore tidbit connected to the stones of Baranzyre. In the master bedroom of the lodge, sitting right on the bedside table, is an unusual gem. These gems are part of the legendary crown of Baranzyre, a symbol of the Thieves Guild's former glory. The fact that Maven has one in her private bedroom is not a coincidence. It is a silent testament to her deep intrinsic link to the guild. She isn't just a client, she is a keeper of their history. It suggests she might even know more about the guild's heritage than the current guildmaster does. She sleeps next to a relic of thieves. It's a trophy. It's a reminder that she owns the shadows. But why the mercenaries? Why the extreme security for a house that is often empty? The fan theory community has spent years debating what exactly goes on at the Black-Briar Lodge when the player isn't there. The most compelling theory is that the lodge serves as a neutral ground for Maven's high-level diplomatic and criminal meetings. This is where she likely meets with Thalmor agents, away from the prying eyes of the Nord traditionalists in Riften. It is where she negotiates with the Dark Brotherhood. It is where she stores the books that she doesn't want the Imperial auditors to see. The lodge is essentially an offshore bank account in building form. It is where the dirty assets are scrubbed clean. The mercenaries aren't just guarding a house. They are guarding the evidence of treason and racketeering. Their aggression makes sense in this context. They are paid to ensure that no witnesses leave the property alive. They are the cleanup crew. Let's look closer at these mercenaries. They are a mix of races: orcs, Nords, Imperials. This diversity is telling. They aren't bound by clan loyalty or patriotism. They are bound by coin. They are the ultimate capitalist soldiers. Maven has bought their swords, and in doing so, she has bought their silence. In a world where honour is often cited as the highest virtue, these men have none. They are a reflection of Maven's worldview. Everything and everyone has a price. The basement of the lodge is of particular interest during the quest Promises to Keep, which we touched on with Sibbi. This is where the lineage papers for the Horsefrost are kept. It seems like a small detail, paperwork for a horse, but it represents the bureaucratic side of the Black-Briar Mafia. Maven doesn't just steal the horse, she steals its identity. She steals its legal standing. The lodge is the administrative centre for her illegal acquisitions. It's where she files the serial numbers she's filed off. There is also a palpable sense of isolation here. The lodge is far enough from the row that screams wouldn't be heard. If Maven needed to interrogate someone, this would be the place. The basement has plenty of room, and the mercenaries certainly wouldn't object. The rustic charm of the exterior hides a potential torture chamber. It's the cabin in the woods trope, but instead of a supernatural horror, the monster is a middle-aged businesswoman with a monopoly on mead. The combat encounters here can be surprisingly difficult for lower-level players. The mercenaries are levelled, meaning they get stronger as you do. They use advanced tactics, coordinating their attacks. This suggests they are professionals, likely veterans of the Great War, who found that mercenary work pays better than service to the Empire or the Stormcloaks. Maven has recruited the best of the worst. She has privatised the elite soldiery of Tamriel for her own protection. Visually, the lodge stands in stark contrast to the decay of Riften. Riften is rotting wood and murky water. The lodge is pristine timber and mountain air. It represents the wealth extracted from the city. The labour of the Meadery workers, the stolen goods from the Thieves Guild, the extortion money from the shopkeepers, it all funnels here into this beautiful exclusive estate. It is the physical manifestation of the wealth transfer from the poor of the Rift to the Black-Briar coffers. If you sneak around the exterior, you might notice the stables. They are empty usually, but they are maintained. This anticipates the arrival of Frost, or perhaps the departure of messengers riding hard for Solitude or the Imperial City. The lodge is a node in a communication network. It is a listening post. From this vantage point, Maven can watch the road, watch the valley, and watch her empire expand. But the lodge's security is about to be tested. For all its mercenaries and locked doors, it has a weakness. It relies on the assumption that no one would be crazy enough to rob Maven Black-Briar. But as we know, the Dragonborn is exactly that kind of crazy, especially when hired by a desperate ex-lover like Louis Latruche. The lodge is the setting for one of the most brazen heists in the game, the theft of a living, breathing asset. The irony is thick. Maven, the woman who uses the Thieves Guild to rob others, is about to be robbed herself. And the object of the theft isn't gold or gems, but a horse. A magnificent white stallion that represents the pinnacle of Black-Briar breeding. The theft of Frost is not just a property crime, it is an insult. It is a strike at the family's pride. So, tighten your boots and check your inventory for invisibility potions. We are going to slip past those mercenaries, pick the lock on the back door, and infiltrate the inner sanctum of the Black-Briar Lodge. We are here to steal a horse, but in doing so, we are going to expose the fragility of Maven's control. Even the most guarded fortress has a back door, and tonight we are kicking it open. The sun has dipped below the tree line, casting long skeletal shadows across the grounds of the Black-Briar Lodge. The mercenaries are patrolling in their heavy steel armour, the clanking of their greaves the only sound cutting through the chirping of crickets. We are crouching in the bushes, breath held, preparing to commit what is arguably the most suicidal crime in the Rift. We aren't here to assassinate a target or burn a banner. We are here for a horse. But this isn't just any horse, this is Frost, the equine pride of the Black-Briar lineage, and the centrepiece of a plot that reeks of betrayal, incompetence, and high-stakes gambling. This brings us to the quest Promises to Keep, a narrative arc that perfectly encapsulates the chaotic, backstabbing nature of Riften's criminal underworld. The architect of this madness is a Breton named Louis Latrouche. You can find him lurking in the Bee and Barb, leaning against a pillar with the desperate swagger of a man who owes money to very bad people. Latrouche is a hustler. He's smooth, he's persuasive, and he has made a deal with Sibbi Black-Briar to buy Frost. But, as we know, Sibbi is currently enjoying the hospitality of the Mistvale Keep dungeon, and the deal has gone sour. Sibbi took the money, but the horse remains locked up at the lodge. Latrouche, not wanting to walk into the lion's den himself, which is arguably the only smart decision he makes, hires you to finish the transaction. Or rather, to steal what he believes is rightfully his. The mission is twofold: break into the lodge to steal the identity papers, and then break into the stable to steal the horse itself. It is a classic smash and grab, but the target weighs 1,000 pounds and eats carrots. Here is the core in-game fact that makes this heist so memorable. Frost is not your average Skyrim mount. If you succeed in stealing him, you quickly realise that he has higher health and stamina than almost any other horse in the game. He is a tank on 4 legs. The Black-Briars didn't just breed a racehorse, they bred a warhorse. Stealing him feels different. When you mount Frost and thunder out of the lodge's courtyard, usually with mercenaries firing arrows at your back, it feels like you're driving a stolen sports car out of a maximum security impound lot. The sheer power of the animal underlines the wealth of the family. They don't ride nags, they ride beasts of war. But the heist requires more than just horsemanship. It requires administrative theft. You have to sneak into the basement of the lodge, that same basement we discussed earlier, where the torture likely happens, and find the lineage papers. This detail is crucial. In the world of high-end breeding, the horse is worthless without the paperwork. It's like stealing a masterpiece painting without the certificate of authenticity. Maven has bureaucratic locked her assets. By stealing the papers, you aren't just taking an animal, you are stripping the Black-Briar name from it. You're erasing their ownership legally as well as physically. The involvement of Sibbi in this plot adds another layer of dysfunction to the family dynamic. Sibbi effectively sold his mother's horse to pay off his own debts, or perhaps just to spite her. He is cannibalizing the family assets from his jail cell. It shows that the Black-Briar united front is a lie. They are a nest of vipers biting each other's tails. Sibbi is willing to weaken the family's prestige. Losing Frost is a massive embarrassment, just to secure some quick coin and a favour from a Breton fixer. Now let's talk about the conclusion of the quest, which offers a delightful twist. When you ride Frost to the meeting spot in the forest to hand him over to Latrouche, you have options. You can be a dutiful employee and hand over the reins, or you can embrace the spirit of Riften. You can threaten Latrouche. You can tell him that if he doesn't hand over the payment and the horse, you'll tell Maven everything. Latrouche, being a coward who knows exactly what Maven does to people who cross her, folds immediately. He gives you the gold, he leaves the horse, and he runs for his life. This results in the player acquiring Frost permanently. It is one of the few times you can essentially rob a quest giver blind and get away with it. You end up with the gold, the best horse in Skyrim, and the satisfaction of outmaneuvering a con artist. It is the ultimate Riften hello. There is a hilarious obscure lore tidbit, or rather a notorious bug that has become lore by virtue of its persistence, concerning Louis Latrouche's fate. If you complete the quest and Latruche survives, the game script often malfunctions in a spectacular way. Players frequently report seeing Louis Latruche standing outside Whiterun stables, duplicated. Sometimes there are 2 of him, sometimes 3, sometimes he is waist-deep in the ground. While this is a glitch, the community has embraced it as the curse of the Black-Briars. It's as if Maven's reach is so powerful it shattered his reality. He tried to steal from her, and now he is doomed to exist as a glitch in the Matrix, eternally confused and multiplying near a stable for the rest of time. Even if the game works as intended, Latruche's fate is grim. If he takes the horse, he rides off, but he often dies shortly after to wolves or bandits because he isn't programmed to be essential anymore. It's a subtle reinforcement of the idea that crossing the Black-Briars is a death sentence. The universe itself seems to conspire to kill him. You didn't have to kill him, you just had to let him leave the safety of the city with stolen property. Fate, or Maven's invisible hand, took care of the rest. This section also highlights the concept of leverage. The entire transaction is built on blackmail. Sibbi blackmails Latruche by keeping the money. Latruche attempts to blackmail the Black-Briars by stealing the horse. And, finally, the Dragonborn blackmails Latruche by threatening to tell Maven. It is a circle of extortion. No one in this equation is honest. It is a perfect microcosm of the Rift's economy. Value is determined not by production, but by who has the most dirt on whom. Fan debates often centre on Maven's reaction, or lack thereof. Interestingly, Maven never sends thugs after you specifically for stealing Frost. She never mentions it. Why? Some believe it's because she doesn't know it was you. The guards at the lodge were killed or evaded, and Latruche is the obvious suspect. Others believe she simply wrote it off. To her, Frost is just an asset. A valuable one, yes, but replacing him is a matter of gold, and she has infinite gold. Pursuing a vendetta over a horse might cost more than the horse's worth. It shows her cold pragmatism. She doesn't get emotional over spilled milk, or in this case, stolen stallions. She likely just had Latruche added to the Dark Brotherhood's list, and moved on. However, there is a darker theory. Perhaps she let it happen. Maybe Frost had a defect. Maybe she wanted to see if Sibbi had the gall to do it. It's unlikely, but with Maven, you never know if you are a player in her game or just a pawn being sacrificed for a positioning advantage. The theft of Frost also serves as a check on the Black-Briar invincibility. It proves they can be touched, they can be humiliated. For all their mercenaries and political connections, a single determined individual can ride right out of their front gate with their prize. It punctures the aura of fear they rely on. It reminds us that underneath the terrifying reputation, they are just people who can be robbed like anyone else. As you ride Frost through the birch forests, the wind in your hair, you're riding a symbol of rebellion. You have taken a piece of the Black-Briar power and made it your own. But do not get too comfortable. While we have embarrassed the family, we haven't crippled them. Their true power doesn't lie in horses or mead or even money, it lies in their network. They have eyes everywhere. They have an army of spies who live in the sewers and shadows, listening to every whisper. We're returning to the city now, but we're going underground. Beneath the streets of Riften lies the Ratway, the home of the Thieves Guild. But make no mistake, the guild is no longer an independent organisation of Robin Hoods. It has been bought and paid for. It is now the personal intelligence agency and enforcement arm of Maven Black-Briar. We're about to explore how the Mafia of Riften weaponized the beggars and the burglars. We leave the fresh mountain air of the lodge and return to the choking humidity of the city. But we're not staying on the streets. To understand the true reach of Maven Black-Briar, we must go lower. We must lift the iron grate, drop into the murky water, and wade through the slime of the Ratway until we reach the ragged flagon. Here, amidst the leaking pipes and the scent of desperation, sits the Thieves Guild. Once, they were the stuff of legends, heirs to the Grey Fox, masters of the shadows who stole Elder Scrolls and rewrote history. Now they are little more than a wholly owned subsidiary of Black-Briar Industries. The relationship between Maven and the Thieves Guild is the definitive proof of her power. In most cities, the criminal underground operates in opposition to the ruling class. The Jarl tries to catch the thieves try to rob the Jarl. In Riften, that dynamic has been short-circuited. Maven has effectively acquired the guild. She is their primary shareholder, their biggest client, and their insurance policy. They are not an independent organisation. They are her shadow army, her private intelligence agency, and her debt collection service, all rolled into one pathetic leather-clad package. Here is the core in-game fact that establishes this hierarchy. During the quest Loud and Clear, and subsequently Dampened Spirits, you're sent to speak with Maven not as a partner, but as a subordinate. Brynjolf, the second in command of the guild, speaks of her with a mixture of respect and terrified pragmatism. He explicitly tells you that the guild relies on Maven's influence to keep the guards off their backs. If she's not happy, we're not happy, is the general sentiment. When you finally meet her to receive your orders, she skips the pleasantries. She tells you exactly which competitor to ruin and how to do it. She doesn't ask if the guild is available, she assumes their obedience. This dynamic completely strips the romance. Away from the Thieves Guild, you aren't Robin Hood. You aren't stealing from the rich to give to the poor. You're stealing from the middle class to give to the ultra-rich. You are the enforcer for a monopoly. When Maven points a finger at Honningbrew Meadery or a recalcitrant merchant, the guild jumps. They are the stick she uses to beat the city into submission when her carrot, money, isn't enough. Consider the sheer utility of this arrangement for Maven. If she used her own mercenaries to rough up a shopkeeper, it would be a scandal. It would be the Black-Briars are violent. But if the Thieves Guild does it, then it's just crime. It's just Riften being Riften. She outsources the violence to a third party, maintaining plausible deniability while reaping all the benefits. The guild takes the risk, she takes the profit. It is money laundering, but for accountability. This brings us to a compelling obscure lore tidbit involving a man named Vald. Vald is not a random bandit. He's a high-level mercenary guarding the backyard of Mercer Frey, the guildmaster himself. Yet, Vald is trapped in a web of debt to Maven Black-Briar. If you dig into the backstory during the quest The Pursuit, you find that Vald owes Maven a massive sum for losing a shipment of her mead, likely the Quill of Gemination incident involving the lake. Think about the power dynamics there. The guildmaster's personal bodyguard is owned by Maven. She has leverage over the man protecting the leader of the Thieves Guild. It implies that Maven has infiltrated the guild at every level. She controls the foot soldiers who plant the stolen rings, and she holds the leash of the elite guards protecting the leadership. She asks you to retrieve the Quill of Gemination not because she needs a quill, but to remind everyone that she owns people. The quill is just a receipt for a soul. The presence of shadow marks around Riften also tells a story. If you look closely at the doorframe of Black-Briar Manor, you will see the specific shadow mark for protected. In the language of the guild, this means do not touch, do not rob, do not even look at this house wrong. It is a magical, symbolic barrier that keeps the thieves out. But it's more than just a do not enter sign. It's a brand of ownership. The guild acknowledges her house as sanctuary not out of respect for the law, but out of fear of the reprisal. If a thief were to steal a silver goblet from Maven, the guild itself would likely hunt them down and execute them to appease her. They police themselves to keep her happy. This leads to a fierce fan theory and community debate. Is Maven Black-Briar the real guild master? Obviously, in terms of game mechanics, Mercer Frey then the Dragonborn holds the title. But in terms of functional power, fans argue that Maven is the de facto CEO, while the guildmaster is just the operations manager. Mercer Frey was obsessed with the eyes of the Falmer and his own greed, often ignoring the day-to-day survival of the guild. Maven, however, was the one providing the steady stream of contracts that kept the lights on in the cistern. Without her patronage, the guild would have starved or been wiped out by the city guard years ago. Some lore divers go even further, suggesting that the curse of bad luck that plagues the guild, which they attribute to Nocturnal's disfavour, was actually exacerbated by their reliance on Maven. By turning away from independent thievery and becoming corporate shills for a corrupt noble, they lost their spiritual way. They stopped being thieves and started being goons. The bad luck is just the natural consequence of losing their identity and becoming dependent on a predator who cares for nothing but herself. The atmosphere in the Ragged Flagon reinforces this. It is a depressing place. The members, Vex, Delvin, Dirge, are cynical and tired. They don't talk about the thrill of the heist. They talk about quotas and gold. Maven represents the corporate takeover of their culture. She has gentrified the Ratway, in a sense. She has turned the chaotic, romantic world of larceny into a line item on her ledger. Let's look at the debt collection, Radiant Quests. Vex and Delvin send you out to cook the books or bedlam jobs. Who benefits from these? Often the targets are businesses that rival the Black-Briars or refuse to pay protection money. Even the random, procedurally generated quests feel like they serve Maven's interests. Destabilizing Whiterun's market? Good for Maven. Stealing from Markarth's Silver Bloods? Good for Maven. The Dragonborn runs around Skyrim thinking they are rebuilding the guild, but they are really just expanding Maven's sphere of influence. There is also the matter of the guards. We know the Riften guards are corrupt. I caught someone stealing your sweet roll, they joke, but why are they corrupt? Because Maven pays them. The Thieves Guild can operate openly in Riften, literally standing around in the market scouting targets, because the guards are paid to look the other way. But who pays the guards? The guild doesn't have the money at the start of the game. Maven does. She subsidizes the corruption that allows the guild to exist. She creates the ecosystem of lawlessness that they require to breathe. If you become the guild master, you essentially become Maven's junior partner. She treats you with slightly more respect. She might say congratulations in that dry, sarcastic tone, but the dynamic doesn't change. You still answer to her. You're still the one fixing her problems. The title of guild master is just a fancy hat. The person wearing the crown is still sitting in the manor drinking wine. And what happens if you cross her? She explicitly threatens to call the Dark Brotherhood. This is a subtle reminder to the Thieves Guild. You're useful, but you're replaceable. The guild offers non-lethal solutions, usually. The Brotherhood offers final solutions. Maven keeps both on retainer, playing them off against each other. The Thieves Guild knows that if they fail her, they won't just get fired, they will get a visit from Astrid. The symbiotic rot goes deep. The guild uses the Black-Briar Meadery's export wagons to smuggle contraband across the border. We find illicit goods hidden in mead barrels. This turns the legitimate business of the Meadery into a cover for smuggling, and the criminal expertise of the smuggling ring into a logistics arm for the Meadery. It is a perfect circle of crime. The mead hides the skooma money buys the influence protects the mead. As we stand in the cistern, watching the thieves sharpen their daggers and count their coins, we have to ask, are they free? They live in a sewer. They are hunted by the law, theoretically, and they serve a mistress who would sell them all out for a slightly better interest rate on a loan. They are the Shadow. Army? Yes, but they are soldiers fighting a war they don't understand, for a general who views them as cannon fodder. The Thieves Guild thinks they run the underground, but the truth is, the underground is just the basement of the Black-Briar estate. Maven owns the floor they walk on, the shadows they hide in, and the very air they breathe. And if the guild is the left hand of Maven's influence, the hand that steals and intimidates, then the right hand is the one that holds the dagger. We've mentioned them in whispers, but now we must face the reality. Maven's connections go beyond the petty larceny of the Ratway. When intimidation fails, when financial ruin isn't enough, she turns to the only organisation in Tamriel more feared than her own family. We are moving from the grey morality of thieves to the pitch-black void of assassins. It is time to examine the evidence, the rituals, and the terrifying truth of the Black Sacrament. Maven Black-Briar doesn't just want you to pay your debts. Sometimes she just wants you dead. We have walked the wooden planks of the Meadery, crouched in the bushes of the lodge, and waded through the muck of the Ratway. We have seen how Maven Black-Briar steals, cheats, intimidates, and extorts. But there is a line that separates a criminal mastermind from a monster. A thief takes your coin, a thug breaks your knees. But what happens when Maven wants something more final? What happens when a problem cannot be solved by a broken window or a poisoned vat of mead? We are crossing that line now. We are stepping out of the grey shadows of the Thieves Guild and into the pitch-black void of the Dark Brotherhood. Because, my friends, Maven Black-Briar doesn't just hire goons, she hires executioners. The Thieves Guild has a code, no killing. It's bad for business. Dead men don't pay protection money. But Maven has no such code. To her, death is just another business transaction, a final settlement of accounts. And the evidence of this isn't just hearsay whispered by terrified guards. It is architectural. It is built into the very foundation of her home. Here is the core in-game fact that serves as the smoking gun. If you possess the skill to pick a master-level lock, or if you simply pickpocket the key from Maven herself, you can open a heavy reinforced door in the basement of the Black-Briar Manor. Inside, hidden away from the servants and the guests, is a room that chills the blood. It is a shrine to Sithis. On a table lies a human heart, pieces of human flesh, nightshade petals, and a dagger. A skeleton lies propped up, part of the ritual effigy. This is the Black Sacrament. This is the ritual used to summon a member of the Dark Brotherhood. Most citizens of Skyrim speak of this ritual in hushed, terrified tones, fearing that even saying the words might bring bad luck. Aventus Aretino, the boy in Windhelm, performs it out of desperate, childish grief. Maven performs it in the comfort of her own basement, likely with a glass of fine wine in hand, as casually as one might write a letter to a supplier. The existence of this room proves that Maven is not just a client, she is a frequent flyer. You don't build a permanent ritual chamber for a one-time job, you build it because you intend to use it again and again. It implies a standing relationship with the assassins. While the Jarl sits on her throne upstairs, oblivious, Maven is downstairs, chanting the ancient words, praying to the Night Mother to send a blade in the dark. This brings us to a fascinating obscure lore tidbit found in the form of a letter. If you snoop around sufficiently, or simply listen to her idle threats, you realise Maven's connection to Astrid, the leader of the Dark Brotherhood sanctuary in the Pine Forest, is personal. She doesn't just know of them, she knows names. In her dialogue, she explicitly threatens the Dragonborn. I have powerful friends, the Dark Brotherhood, for example. But there is a specific letter found in the game files, and sometimes restored by mods or found in specific Radiant contexts, where Maven expresses frustration with the Brotherhood's delays. She writes to them like an unhappy customer complaining about late pizza delivery. I paid for a service, the tone suggests, and I expect results. It completely demystifies the assassins. To the rest of the world, they are ghosts, demons, wraiths. To Maven, they are contractors. She treats the procurement of a murder with the same bureaucratic impatience she treats a shipment of glass bottles. This relationship fundamentally changes how we view her power. If she only controlled the Thieves Guild, you could survive her. You might lose your business, you might be beaten, but you would live. With the Brotherhood on her payroll, there is no survival. There is only the question of when. It explains why no one, absolutely no one in Riften challenges her openly. Mjol the Lioness talks a big game about cleaning up the city, but notice that Mjol is still alive. Why? Because she hasn't crossed the line yet. She is a nuisance, not a threat. If Mjol ever became a genuine threat to the bottom line, the Black Sacrament would be performed and the Lioness would be silenced. The fan theory community has often debated the financial relationship between the Black-Briars and the Brotherhood. At the start of the game, the Brotherhood is crumbling. They are poor, desperate, and losing influence. Yet, they still operate. Who is keeping them afloat? Many fans argue that Maven is their primary benefactor in the Rift. Her steady stream of contracts provides the gold they need to keep the sanctuary running. In a sense, by buying Black-Briar mead, you are indirectly funding the Dark Brotherhood. It's a terrifying economic ecosystem where your drink money buys the arrow that kills a beggar in the next town over. There is also a theory that the skeleton in her basement isn't just a prop. Some speculate it was a former servant, or perhaps a lover who learned too much. The ritual requires body parts, a heart, flesh. Where did Maven get them? Did she visit the Hall of the Dead, or did she source them, locally? Given Ingun's habits and the general disappearance rate in Riften, it is not hard to imagine Maven carving the heart out of a problem herself to summon the solution to a bigger problem. It adds a visceral, bloody layer to her character. She isn't afraid to get her hands wet if the ritual demands it. The psychological impact of this alliance is immeasurable. When Maven looks at you with those cold dead eyes and says, "Don't cross me," she isn't bluffing. The threat of the Brotherhood is the ultimate trump card. It allows her to negotiate from a position of absolute strength. Why haggle over prices when you can simply imply that the other party might wake up with a dagger in their chest? We must also consider the contrast between the two guilds. The Thieves Guild is loud, they break things, they leave notes. They make a mess to send a message. The Brotherhood is silent. When Maven uses the Thieves Guild, she wants you to know it was her. She wants the public humiliation. When she uses the Brotherhood, she wants you gone. The duality gives her a complete toolset for domination. She can ruin your reputation, or she can end your existence. Even the Brotherhood respects her. If you join the Dark Brotherhood and speak to the other members, They speak of Maven with a professional nod. They recognise her as one of us in spirit, if not in title. She possesses the Sithis mindset, a total disregard for life, a focus on the void of empathy. Astrid, who is arrogant and controlling, seems to have no issue taking orders from Maven. It's a meeting of queens, the Queen of the Sanctuary and the Queen of the Rift. Visually, the basement room is a masterpiece of environmental storytelling. It is clean, organised, and hidden behind a master lock. It isn't a chaotic mess like a necromancer's cave. It is precise. The candles are arranged perfectly, the dagger is polished. It reflects Maven's personality. Evil, but organised evil. Evil with a spreadsheet. There is a moment in the game, if you are the listener of the Dark Brotherhood, where the dynamic shifts slightly. You, the player, are now the leader of the assassins, yet Maven still treats you like a lackey. "I have a job for you," she might say. It shows her inability to see anyone as an equal. Even if you are the legendary listener who speaks to the Night Mother, to Maven, you are just the person she calls when she needs a drain unclogged. Only the drain is a person, and the clog is their pulse. This section of her life is the darkest secret because it is the most undeniable proof of her irredeemable nature. You can argue that the Meadery is just business. You can argue that the Thieves Guild is just politics. But the Black Sacrament, that is pure malice. It is the invocation of void worship to solve earthly inconveniences. It shows a soul that has not just withered, but has been voluntarily excised. As we back out of that cold basement room, carefully locking the door behind us so the guards don't see, the weight of Maven's power feels heavier. She holds the keys to the city's economy, the city's crime, and the city's mortality. She has covered all the bases. But there is one final piece of the puzzle. One final hurdle she has had to clear to maintain this stranglehold. The law. Technically, there is a Jarl in Riften. Her name is Layla Lawgiver. She sits on the throne, she wears the crown, and she issues the decrees. But as we are about to see, Layla is not the ruler of Riften. She is the puppet, and Maven Black-Briar is the one pulling the strings, using a combination of flattery, deceit, and a very corrupt steward to turn the Jarl's court into a theatre of the absurd. We are heading up the stairs to the main hall of Mistvale Keep. It's time to watch a masterclass in political manipulation. It's time to see how Maven rules the city without ever sitting on the throne, at least not yet. We emerge from the shadows of the basement, shaking the chill of the Black Sacrament from our bones, and ascend the wide wooden stairs to the great hall of Mistvale Keep. The air here is warmer, scented with roasting meats and the burning pine logs of the central hearth. It is the seat of power in the Rift, the place where laws are made and justice is dispensed. At the far end of the hall sits Jarl Layla Lawgiver, a woman draped in the finery of a Nord noble, clutching her sceptre with the conviction of a true Stormcloak patriot. She looks the part. She sounds the part. But as we have learned, in Riften, appearances are not just deceiving, they are often the exact opposite of reality. Layla Lawgiver is a tragedy of incompetence. She is not a malicious woman. Unlike Sidgeir in Falkreath, who is corrupt and lazy, or Skald in Dawnstar, who is senile and fanatical, Layla genuinely seems to care about her people. She worries about the Imperial Legion encroaching on her borders. She gives speeches about the sanctity of Nord independence. She believes she is the shield of the Rift. But the sad, pathetic truth is that she is not the shield. She is the blindfold. Here is the core in-game fact that defines the political landscape of Riften. Layla is utterly, hopelessly oblivious to the fact that Maven Black-Briar runs her city. If you stand in the throne room and listen to the ambient dialogue, you will hear Layla ask Maven for advice. She treats Maven as a trusted confidant, a pillar of the community. She speaks of the Black-Briar family as if they are merely successful merchants, completely unaware that the woman standing 3 feet away from her is the patron saint of the Thieves Guild and a frequent caller of the Dark Brotherhood. It is a level of dramatic irony that borders on farce. The Jarl is terrified of thieves, yet she invites the Queen of Thieves to dinner. This dynamic is not accidental, it is engineered. Maven Black-Briar does not sit on the throne, because she doesn't need to. The throne is a target. The Jarl has to deal with peasant complaints, court drama, and the stress of the civil war. Maven prefers to let Layla handle the tedium while she reaps the benefits. Layla is the puppet, dancing on strings made of gold and deceit, and she is so convinced of her own agency that she doesn't even feel the tug. The primary mechanism of this control is not Layla herself, but her steward, Anuriel. In Skyrim, the steward is the person who actually runs the hold. They handle the finances, the day-to-day operations, and the advising of the Jarl. Anuriel, a wood elf with a sharp mind and a quiet voice, is the lens through which Layla sees the world. And unfortunately for the Jarl, that lens is owned by the Black-Briars. This leads us to a critical obscure lore tidbit found during the Stormcloak questline, specifically the mission Compelling Tribute. If you blackmail Anuriel, you discover a letter, or rather incriminating, evidence stored in her dresser. This evidence proves that Anuriel is not just corrupt, she is an active agent for the Thieves Guild. She is on the take. The Thieves Guild, and by extension Maven, pays Anuriel to filter information. When the Jarl asks, "How is the fight against crime going?" Anuriel replies, "Splendidly, my Jarl. The guards are vigilant." Meanwhile, the guild is literally stripping the market stalls bare just outside the keep's front door. Anuriel is the firewall. She ensures that no complaints about Maven ever reach Layla's ears. She frames the Black-Briars as victims of circumstance or pillars of stability. She manipulates the Jarl's paranoia, directing her anger toward the Empire or independent bandits, while creating a blind spot around the Black-Briar operations. It is a masterclass in bureaucratic sabotage. Layla Lawgiver is effectively living in a simulation created by her own staff. The relationship between Anuriel and the Jarl's housecarl, Unmid, Snowshod, adds another layer of leverage. It is heavily implied and often blatantly obvious that Anuriel and Unmid are lovers. Unmid is a fierce warrior, a true Nord who hates the Empire. He should be the one to spot the corruption. He should be the one to protect his Jarl from the snake in the grass. But he is blinded by his affection for Anuriel. By compromising the steward, Maven has effectively neutralized the bodyguard as well. It's a domino effect of manipulation. This situation sparks a lively community debate regarding Layla's intelligence. Is she truly this stupid, or is she practicing willful ignorance? Some fans argue that Layla knows Maven is dangerous but feels powerless to stop her, so she adopts a persona of naivety to survive. If she openly challenged Maven, she might end up missing like so many others. By playing the fool, she keeps her head and her crown. It's the Jar Baelish theory applied to a Nord matriarch, feign weakness to avoid being a target. However, the majority of the lore evidence points to genuine incompetence. Layla's dialogue regarding the war is fervent and sincere. She truly believes Ulfric Stormcloak is the saviour. She truly believes the prophecy of the dragons. It is hard to square that sincerity with a calculated act of deception regarding Maven. It is far more likely that she is simply a woman out of her depth, a traditionalist ruler in a city that has been modernised by crime. She is fighting a war with axes and shields, while Maven is fighting with ledgers and spies. Layla brought a knife to a nuclear standoff. The manipulation becomes even more apparent when you consider the Civil War. Layla is a staunch Stormcloak supporter. Riften is a Stormcloak hold. Maven Black-Briar, on the other hand, is a pragmatist with deep ties to the Empire and the Thalmor, which we will cover shortly. Theoretically, Layla should view Maven as a traitor. Maven exports goods to Solitude and Cyrodiil. She has Imperial contacts. Yet, Layla ignores this. Why? Because Maven tells her what she wants to hear. Maven likely frames her Imperial connections as spying or necessary economics to fund the rebellion. She feeds Layla's bias. Layla is so desperate for allies that she accepts the wolf because it is wearing a very expensive blue cloak. Let's look at the Jarl's court wizard, Willandryer. She is eccentric, to put it mildly. She loses items constantly, forgets her train of thought, and seems to be suffering from a magical form of ADHD. She is absolutely no help to Layla in terms of governance. With a distracted wizard, a compromised steward, and a love-struck housecarl, Layla is completely isolated. She sits on that throne alone, surrounded by people who are either useless or actively working against her. The visual storytelling in Mistveil Keep reinforces the Black-Briar dominance. Maven is often found lounging against a pillar or sitting at the Jarl's table, looking bored. She doesn't. Boo. She doesn't show deference. She occupies the space with the confidence of a landlord visiting a tenant. Layla, conversely, often looks stressed, leaning forward, furrowing her brow. The body language tells you everything. One woman is working hard to rule. The other is hardly working and ruling everything. There is also the matter of the Riften guards. Layla believes they are Riften's finest. We know they are Riften's cheapest. The guards shake down visitors at the gate, visitors' tax, take bribes from thieves, and turn a blind eye to the Black-Briar crimes. Layla signs their paychecks, but Maven provides their bonuses. When a guard says, "Disrespect the law, and you disrespect me," they are reciting a script. They don't care about the law. They care about the flow of coin. Layla is presiding over a police force that has been privatized by her best friend. If the Empire takes Riften, Layla is ousted. She moves to the Palace of the Kings in Windhelm, where she spends her days complaining about how unfair it all was. Even in exile, she doesn't seem to realize it was Maven who likely opened the gates. She blames the Imperial dogs, never suspecting that the bite marks on her administration match Maven's dental records perfectly. This puppeteering serves a strategic purpose for Maven. If she were Jarl openly, she would have to deal with the scrutiny of the position. She would have to answer to the High King, or Ulfric. She would have to follow protocols. By keeping Layla in charge, Maven maintains a buffer. Layla takes the heat for the city's problems, the poverty, the skooma epidemic, the rat infestation. Maven stays in the shadows, accruing wealth without responsibility. It is the ultimate form of political camouflage. The tragedy of Layla Lawgiver is that she likely goes to sleep every night thinking she's done a good job. She thinks she's secured the borders and upheld the traditions of the Nords. She doesn't realise that while she was watching the horizon for Imperial legions, the enemy was already inside the keep, eating her food, drinking her wine, and rewriting her laws. As we look at Layla one last time, sitting on her wooden throne, surrounded by the banners of the Rift, we can't help but feel a twinge of pity. She is playing a game of checkers. Maven is playing 4D chess. And the saddest part? Layla doesn't even know they are playing a game. She thinks they are on the same team. But Maven's ambition is not limited to the Rift, or even to the Stormcloak Rebellion. She is a woman of the world, and she knows that the true power in Tamriel lies not in Windhelm, but in the White Gold Tower, and perhaps even the Somerset Isles. While she manipulates Layla with one hand, her other hand is reaching across borders, shaking hands with the enemies of Skyrim to ensure that no matter who wins the war, the Black-Briars come out on top. We are moving now to the world of high diplomacy and high treason. We are going to examine the evidence of Maven's collusion with the Empire and the Thalmor. Because for a true business mogul, patriotism is just an obstacle to profit, while the rest of Skyrim bleeds into the snow, arguing over the worship of Talos or the legitimacy of the White Gold Concordat. Maven Black-Briar is doing what she does best, hedging her bets. We have seen her dominate the local economy, crush her rivals, and manipulate the local government. But a true tycoon knows that local dominance is fragile if the geopolitical ground shifts beneath your feet. To secure the future of the Black-Briar dynasty, Maven must look beyond the walls of Riften. She must navigate the treacherous waters of the Civil War, and in doing so, she reveals a level of cynicism that makes the Dark Brotherhood look like a charity organisation. In the world of Skyrim, there are two colours, the blue of the Stormcloaks and the red of the Empire. Maven Black-Briar wears neither. Her colour is gold, her loyalty is to the Ledger, and if you need proof that she's playing both sides against the middle, look no further than the most exclusive social event of the year, Elenwen's cocktail party at the Thalmor Embassy. Here is the core in-game fact that serves as the ultimate indictment of her patriotism. During the main quest, Diplomatic Immunity, you're tasked with infiltrating a high-security Thalmor gathering to steal intelligence on the dragons. You have to sneak in, hand over your gear to Malborn, and wear fine clothes to blend in. It is a tense, dangerous mission, because the Thalmor are the Gestapo of Tamriel. They arrest, torture, and execute Talos worshippers without trial. And who do you find standing in the main ballroom, holding a goblet of wine and making polite small talk with the High Elves who are actively oppressing her people? Maven Black-Briar. She isn't there as a prisoner. She isn't there as a servant. She's an honoured guest. She's on the invite list of the first emissary of the Aldmeri Dominion, while her Jarl, Layla Lawgiver, is back in Riften railing against the elves and preparing for a war of independence. Maven is, clinking glasses with the enemy's leadership. When you approach her at the party, she doesn't panic. She doesn't try to hide. Her reaction is one of mild annoyance. She tells you, "I don't know what you're doing here, but if you ruin this for me, I'll have you flayed alive." She isn't worried about being exposed as a traitor to Skyrim. She's worried about you causing a scene that might interrupt her networking. She explicitly mentions that she's there to maintain relations. To her, the Thalmor aren't existential threats to humanity. They are just another faction with money and influence, and therefore, they are people she needs to know. This scene perfectly encapsulates her diplomatic immunity. She is untouchable. The Stormcloaks won't touch her because she controls Riften's economy. The Empire won't touch her because she supplies them with goods, and intelligence likely. And the Thalmor won't touch her because she is a useful idiot, or rather a useful genius who keeps the region stable enough for commerce but corrupt enough to be exploited. She has woven a web of protection so thick that she can walk into the lion's den and order a drink. This brings us to an obscure lore tidbit regarding her export licenses. We touched on this briefly with the mead, but the scale is important here. Throughout the game, you can find evidence that Black-Briar mead is one of the few goods that crosses the border into Cyrodiil freely. The Empire has a blockade on Stormcloak territories. Trade is supposed to be strangled, yet Maven's carts roll through. This implies she has a special dispensation from the East Empire Company, or General Tullius himself. She's effectively a sanction buster. She's profiting from the scarcity created by the war. While other merchants starve because they can't move their goods, Maven's monopoly grows because she is the only one with the Imperial Pass. Her relationship with the Empire is far more direct than her relationship with the Stormcloaks. If you side with the Legion in the Civil War and retake the Rift, General Tullius doesn't hold an election. He doesn't ask the people who they want. He immediately installs Maven Black-Briar as the Jarl. There is no hesitation. To the Empire, Maven is the adult in the room. She's pragmatic, she is anti-populist, and she is manageable. They prefer a corrupt tyrant who pays her taxes to a religious zealot who fights for freedom. It reveals the Empire's own moral bankruptcy. They are willing to hand a city over to a Mafia Don because she represents order. This sparks a significant fan theory and community debate. Is Maven a Thalmor asset? We know she attends their parties, but does she actively work for them? Some lore divers argue that Maven is the ideal Thalmor puppet. The Thalmor's goal is to weaken the Empire and keep Skyrim in a state of perpetual civil war to drain resources, as revealed in the Thalmor dossier on Ulfric. Maven contributes to this destabilization perfectly. She corrupts the institutions, weakens the local hold guards, and keeps the populace sedated with alcohol and fear. She is, unknowingly or knowingly, doing the Thalmor's work for them. However, others argue that Maven is too selfish to be a true asset. She would never sell out Skyrim completely because if the Thalmor took over fully, they might nationalize her meadery or impose strict elven laws that hurt her bottom line. She supports the status quo, the stalemate. She wants a weak empire and a distracted Stormcloak rebellion so she can rule the middle ground. She's not pro-Thalmor, she's pro-chaos, as long as she controls the chaos. There is also a darker implication to her presence at the embassy. The Thalmor use that embassy to torture prisoners. We hear the screams from the dungeon below during the quest. Maven is upstairs sipping wine, while her fellow Nords are being flayed in the basement. She has to know. You cannot be that connected and not know what the Thalmor do. Her presence there signifies a total lack of racial or national solidarity. She doesn't care if they torture Talos worshippers, as long as they buy her mead. It is a level of complicity that is chilling. She's essentially dining with the butchers of her people. We must also consider her dialogue regarding the war itself. If you ask her about the conflict, she is dismissive. The war is bad for business, she might say, or conversely, troops need to drink. She views the conflict entirely through the lens of supply and demand. She has no opinion on Talos. She has no opinion on the White Gold Concordat. These are abstract concepts to her. Real power is coin, land, and favours. She has transcended politics to reach a state of pure, unadulterated capitalism. Even the Thieves Guild questline hints at this international reach. The East Empire Company, the massive trading conglomerate of the Empire, has a presence in Solitude during the quest Scoundrels. Folly. You deal with Gulamai, an Argonian fence. Maven has ties to these networks. She uses the guild to muscle in on the East Empire Company's territory or to cut deals with them. She's playing at a level that Layla Lawgiver can't even comprehend. Layla is worrying about the border fort at Greenwall. Maven is worrying about trade tariffs in the Imperial City. The diplomatic immunity aspect of her character also extends to her personal safety. Because she's valuable to everyone, no one can afford to kill her. If the Stormcloaks kill her, The economy of the Rift collapses and they lose a major revenue stream. If the Empire kills her, they lose their foothold in the East. If the Thieves Guild kills her, they lose their patron. She has made herself the too-big-to-fail Bank of Skyrim. This is her ultimate survival strategy. It's not about having the biggest sword, it's about being the person holding everyone else's wallet. But what happens when the balancing act stops? What happens when one side finally wins? As it turns out, Maven has planned for that too. She has positioned herself so that victory for the Empire is a victory for her, and even if the Stormcloaks win, she is too entrenched to be removed. She is the constant variable in the equation of variables. Her relationship with the Empire serves as a stark contrast to the traditional Nord values of honour and loyalty. General Tullius is a pragmatic man. He hates the Nord's barbaric traditions. He finds a kindred spirit in Maven. They both speak the language of efficiency. When he hands her the title of Jarl, it is a transaction. You keep the Rift quiet and we will let you run it however you see fit. It is the legalization of her crime syndicate. As we leave the glittering hall of the Thalmor Embassy, watching Maven whisper something into the ear of a high elf dignitary, we realise that the civil war is just background noise to her. Kings rise and fall, empires crumble, dragons return, but the Black-Briar Meadery, it just keeps brewing. And now we approach the end of our journey. We have seen the crimes, the corruption, and the collusion. There is only one final step for Maven Black-Briar. It is the moment she steps out of the shadows and sits on the throne that she has effectively owned for years. It is the darkest timeline for the Rift, and the inevitable conclusion to her story. Let us witness the coronation of the Mafia Queen. We have reached the end of the line. We have traced the gold, followed the blood, and whispered the secrets of the Black-Briar family from the sewers to the embassy. Now, we witness the final piece of the puzzle falling into place. It is a moment that feels less like a political transition, and more like an eclipse, the moment when the shadow finally swallows the sun completely. We are talking about the rise of Jarl Maven Black-Briar. This eventuality is not a if, but a when, provided the Dragonborn aligns with the Empire or negotiates a specific treaty during Season Unending. When the storm of the civil war clears in the Rift, and Layla Lawgiver is sent packing to the Palace of the Kings to mourn her lost title, Maven steps out from the sidelines. She walks up those wooden steps in Mistveil Keep, not as a guest, not as an advisor, but as the absolute ruler. She sits on the throne, and for the first time, the seat matches the power of the person occupying it. Here is the core in-game fact that defines this new era. When Maven becomes Jarl, she does not adopt the polite diplomatic persona of a standard politician. Her dialogue is shockingly, refreshingly, and terrifyingly honest. If you approach her on the throne, she doesn't ask about your day or the welfare of the hold. She looks you dead in the eye and says, "The title suits me, don't you think?" She openly acknowledges that the Jarlship is just another acquisition, another feather in her cap. She explicitly threatens you, reminding you that just because she's now the law doesn't mean she won't use her other connections to handle problems. The mask is completely off. She's a mob boss with a crown. The transformation of the court is immediate and stark. Gone is the incompetent Anuriel, usually exiled with Layla, and the hot-headed Unmid. In their place, we often see Maul, the thug who usually stands by the city gate shaking down tourists, moved into the Jarl's longhouse. Think about that. The man who was literally a street-level enforcer is now standing at the right hand of the Jarl. It sends a clear message to the court. The days of pretending to follow Nord tradition are over. The new law is the law of the street. This ascension represents the darkest timeline for the citizens of Riften. Under Layla, there was corruption, yes, but there was also neglect. Neglect, in a way, is a form of freedom. Layla was too stupid to oppress everyone efficiently. Maven is not. With the powers of the Jarlship, she can now legalise her monopoly. She can use the city guards to enforce Meadery contracts. She can use the tax code to bankrupt rivals. She has achieved the totalitarian dream, the fusion of state power and corporate interest. There is a fascinating obscure lore tidbit regarding the title of Thane under Jarl Maven. If you haven't already become Thane of the Rift, and you do so under her rule, the interaction is transactional. She tells you that the title is merely a ceremonial position, but she expects you to be useful. She strips away the honour of the title. To Layla, a Thane is a hero of the hold. To Maven, a Thane is a preferred vendor. It devalues the entire concept of nobility in Skyrim. It confirms that in the Black-Briar era, honour is just currency with a fancy name. This final consolidation of power sparks a profound fan theory and community discussion. Is Maven Black-Briar the true winner of Skyrim? Think about it. Alduin is defeated. The civil war eventually ends. The Dragonborn might disappear or retire, but Maven remains. She has built a dynasty that is recession-proof, war-proof, and dragon-proof. Fans argue that while the player character is the hero of the story, Maven is the conqueror of the setting. She wins the game of life because she plays by a different set of rules. Rules where morality is a handicap and ruthlessness is a virtue. Her rise also creates a paradox for the Imperial Legion. The Empire claims to stand for law and order. They claim to be the civilized alternative to the Stormcloak rebels. Yet, by installing Maven, they are endorsing the most criminal element in the province. It proves that the Empire cares more about stability and tax revenue than actual justice. Maven is their necessary evil. She keeps the rift quiet, she keeps the trade routes open, and she suppresses the rebellion. The fact that she murders people in her basement is a detail the general is happy to overlook. The atmosphere in Riften changes subtly with her on the throne. The guards seem more on edge. The Thieves Guild operates with even more brazen confidence. There is a sense that the city has officially given up. Resistance is futile. Mjol the Lioness, if she's still around, seems smaller, quieter. What can one woman with a sword do against the Jarl herself? To strike at Maven now is to strike at the state. It is treason. Maven has successfully wrapped herself in the flag, or the banner of the rift, to protect her criminal enterprise. We must also look at the future of the dynasty. With Maven as Jarl, Hemming becomes the heir to a hold, not just a business. Sibbi, assuming he ever gets out of jail, which he surely will with a pardon from his mother the Jarl, is now royalty. Ingun is the Princess of Poison. The Black-Briar bloodline is entrenched in the nobility of Skyrim for generations to come. They have legitimized their ill-gotten gains. In 100 years, history books might describe Maven not as a crime lord, but as a shrewd stateswoman who unified the rift during turbulent times. That is the ultimate victory of evil, rewriting history to look like progress. There is a specific interaction involving the player's bounty. If you are a member of the Thieves Guild and Maven is Jarl, you can clear your bounty for half price. But the way she handles it is telling. She doesn't lecture you on the law, she just takes the gold. It confirms that the legal system is now officially a pay-to-play service. Justice is a menu item. The inevitable rise of Jarl Maven is a sobering conclusion to our journey. It reminds us that in the grim reality of Tamriel, the good guys don't always win. Sometimes the bad guys win simply because they are smarter, richer, and willing to do the things the good guys won't. The Dragonborn saves the world from being eaten, but Maven owns the world that's left behind. As we stand in the throne room, watching Maven survey her domain with that cold, imperious stare, we realise that Riften was never really a city of thieves. It was always her city. The thieves, the guards, the Jarls, the dragons, they were just guests, and now the landlord has finally moved into the master suite. The cycle is complete, the mead flows, the coin clinks, the shadows deepen, and atop the pile of broken dreams and stolen horses, Maven Black-Briar sits comfortable, untouched, and eternal. And so, the ledger is closed. We have walked the damp, fog-choked streets of Riften, listened to the whispers in the Ratway, and stood before the throne of a woman who turned corruption into an art form. The story of the Black-Briar family is not a fairy tale. There are no knights in shining armour coming to save the day, only mercenaries in steel plate coming to collect a debt. It is a story of ambition, of cold, calculating power, and of the silence that falls when the gold has been counted and the rivals have been buried. But now the politics and the poisons can fade away. The schemes of Maven, the rage of Hemming, and the quiet madness of Ingun are no longer your concern. They belong to the rift, and you are far away from that place of shadows. Take a deep breath. Let the tension in your shoulders drop, just like the autumn leaves falling gently to the forest floor. The complex webs of intrigue we've unravelled tonight are loosening, dissolving into the mist. You don't need to watch your back. You don't need to pick a lock or bribe a guard. You're safe in your own sanctuary, a place where the doors are locked only to keep the peace in, not the world out. Imagine the sound of the canal water lapping against the wood, not as a sound of danger, but as a rhythmic, hypnotic lullaby. Slosh, slosh, slosh. The fires in the hearths are dying down to glowing embers, casting a warm, soft orange light that dances on the walls. The meadery is silent, the machinery has stopped, the workers are asleep, the entire world of Skyrim is slowing down, breathing out and settling into the stillness of the night. Let your mind drift away from the harsh stone of the keep and float towards a quiet, comfortable darkness. A darkness that isn't scary, but velvety and soft, a heavy, warm blanket of night. The stories are done, the lore is catalogued, there is nothing left to do but rest. Close your eyes. Let the silence of the void wrap around you, not as a threat, but as a promise of deep, dreamless sleep. The Black-Briars have their empire, you have this moment of peace, sweet dreams.